So like the Lake Hill potential housing development, and specific exit 203, really understand the State Highway 9, Dillon Dam Road, and Lusher intersection, and how that impacts exit 203. The work completed as part of the feasibility study, we're an environmental overview, traffic forecasting. So that was a 2045 horizon year, growth year, and our peak period was a Saturday afternoon during ski season. We'd see the heaviest traffic in all directions. We did traffic operations at existing conditions and then alternatives, and we developed alternatives and concept designs to address some of the deficiencies of the existing conditions. And there was a public and stakeholder engagement. We had a PLT team for the feasibility study itself. We had public outreach, and then because of the pandemic, we had one of the first virtual engagements at the end of it. So the existing conditions on I-70, anyone who drove it at pre-pandemic understood the eastbound level of service going down the hill had both operation issues or traffic slowing down and a lot of safety issues, especially going down the hill. In the westbound direction, it's really the backup from the roundabout back onto I-70 that creates differential speeds. So we had existing conditions from December 30th of 2017, and level of service in the PM peak hour was starting to degrade already on the westbound roundabout to level service F. So that's the worst letter that we can give at the delay service. That's where you're starting to get a lot of congestion and delay. And you can also see the level of service at Lusher and Dillon Dam and existing conditions starting to degrade. Some of the safety issues you see is once that roundabout starts to fail, and it really fails because northbound doesn't have to yield to anyone, it just can go free flow, and that backs up the westbound off ramp. So you get traffic backed up on I-70, and you get the differential speeds that have the safety issue of the ramp basically stop and then the high speed traffic going around it. When we projected the traffic out to 2045 in the existing conditions, you can see all three intersections just drop to level service F. You start to get a lot of delay. Even the eastbound off ramp, which is just a stop controlled intersection. And that's really due to the queues that are developing at Lusher, Dillon Dam, and State Highway 9. That intersection starts to back up into the full interchange. You can see these red lines are the queue lengths that we see in 2045, the existing conditions. You can see the westbound off ramps off the sheet back onto I-70, and the signalized intersection at Lusher and Dillon Dams backing up, which is causing the eastbound off ramp to then back up close to I-70. When we started looking at exit 203 specifically about some improvement options, it was done in phases. So the first two options that we looked at were a low cost potential option that we could use the existing bridge without widening it. And that's when we really started to see that the State Highway 9 Lusher Dillon Dam was affecting the interchange. So that's the first two options. After that, we moved into some more full reconstruct options in diverging diamond interchange, which would kind of move the signals apart and change the westbound off ramp to a free flow, and then you would have to cross westbound and eastbound like a Lusher. And then in the lower left, we have a single point interchange. So you bring both ramps to a single signal. That's more of an urban type interchange, doesn't really fit in the context, but what it did do is it pulled the intersection further away from Dillon Dam and Lusher. And then as we were continuing through this kind of stepped process of alternative development, we came up with an interchange concept that also had a frontage road bypass. So on the bottom right, you can see the frontage road bypass, which is just shown going underneath State Highway 9. That would be combined with changing some of the access at the Lusher Dillon Dam. So restricting some of the through movements, some of the left turn movements, and making that traffic kind of displaced to a frontage road bypass. And what that did is it gave us a lot better operations at the Dillon Dam Lusher intersection that made signalized intersections on the ramps work better. So we came to this kind of conclusion of a frontage road bypass late in the process, and we ended up with a revised concept that did have a 2-lane roundabout with 2 lanes. We were widening the bridge on over I-70. It had 2 southbound lanes and 1 northbound lane, a 2-lane roundabout. You can see the new frontage road connecting over at Meadows and Lusher going north and then running in CDOT right away underneath State Highway 9 over to Dillon Dam Road. On this graphic, you can see the green paths as part of this final revised concept. We tied together some multimodal path, multi-use paths that we were hearing from the public and the PLT were missing. So this completes some of the gap that's out there and gets people across I-70 to the Middle Creek Trailhead access road. So this was done right at the end of the feasibility study. This was presented in 2020 as the revised concept, but we recognize there are a lot of benefits to it, but we had to do some more analysis to confirm this interchange type. As I mentioned, because of the pandemic, we had a virtual public engagement, and we did do a presentation to town council and the board at the time virtually. We had a 30-day presentation that was available, and we got 33 comments. Most of them were all positive. A lot of them were really about when was the project actually going to move into construction. We had some questions about what alternatives were considered. What were the next steps for both 203 and the bigger auxiliary lane project, which was part of the feasibility study. So at that time, CDOT did secure funding for the eastbound auxiliary lane, and we started the design on that. And that wrapped up, the design wrapped up in late 2021 with an advertisement and award early last year. So construction started last spring. It's under construction. You've driven by the bridges down on 205 or over the river, you'll see the girders are in, and it's on schedule to be completed this fall. So that'll give you a continuous eastbound lane from the exit 203 on-ramp all the way through 205 to connect to the third lane that goes up to the tunnel to address those safety issues. So that's where we were at the end of the feasibility study. Since that time, we've done a few other things, and CDOT's engaged us to go to the next level of really confirming the exit 203 configuration and looking at traffic in a more in-depth nature. So our study limit is really just around exit 203 on this project, or at this phase. In the last couple of years, a couple of things have happened that have kind of shaped where we are in the design. CDOT did a metering test on the existing roundabout. So they had a flagger out there and they stopped northbound traffic to see if some sort of ramp meter configuration can improve the operation on that. And what they found is even holding traffic northbound for like 20 seconds in a peak period didn't provide enough gaps for westbound to recover. And then when we tried to model that to replicate what they saw in the field, we really realized that the roundabout at the westbound off ramp is always going to be challenged because of that free flow northbound traffic. And I think it's a couple things. You got uphill ramps in both directions. Once westbound starts to bog down with heavier recreation vehicles or anything like that nature, it just doesn't recover. So we sort of moved away from the roundabout configuration of the westbound on ramp because of this metering test. And then we looked at a feasibility analysis of the concept. And simpler words, could you fix the interchange first, the immediate safety issue, and then come back and look at that frontage road bypass underneath as a second project without having a lot of throwaway? And that was confirmed that they really do marry up to each other very well, that they could be done in two projects. So with the planning effort and the funding, CDOT just updated their 10-year plan, and they've got two phases programmed, $25 million in fiscal years 23-26. And then another 19 million in an out year of 27 plus. At the same time, we started looking at additional traffic modeling and analysis to really look at those intersection configurations and some conceptual design to really narrow in the frontage road feasibility in terms of alignment and grade. I move that again. Very well. Very good. We'll walk through some of what we've done on traffic and then the design, and we've got a simulation to kind of show the traffic movements. But the goals of the traffic analysis at this point were to expand the modeling and study area. And we've got a graphic we'll show you related to that. Confirm the 203 ramp terminal configuration. So I mentioned we moved away from roundabouts and we're looking at signalized intersections now. And then really dive into the frontage road bypass and the roundabout configuration on that frontage road bypass. And then as we started to look at the frontage road bypass, we looked at mitigation elements to address operational issues. So what we have confirmed and mentioned is westbound and eastbound will be signalized in the new concept or the current concept. We expanded the study area during the feasibility study. On the left, you can see we just really looked at the three intersections right at the interchange and adjacent. But with the frontage road bypass, we wanted to be able to chase down how the travel movements might change. So we expanded our study limits down State Highway 9 all the way to School Road and then down Meadow Road and north 10 Mile Road on the east. So we got new traffic counts last fall for both AM and PM weekday to understand, outside of the peak period how this will operate. And then this January, we got a new Saturday afternoon count and projected all those to the new 2045 volume. So we're looking at 3 hours of analysis now. What we're finding is, like we thought, during the weekday, really no issues, and we still have some congestion that we're mitigating that we'll talk about in the peak period, just because you get so much traffic on State Highway 9.
For those projections out to the 2045 year, just to have it on the record, because it's going to be important to the town of Frisco. There was some assumptions made about a large housing project. Okay.
So in the feasibility study, we had taken the best data at the time of that large housing development, the size of it, and the change last fall to a much larger, we accounted for that in our 2045 projections, particularly because we want to make sure that a roundabout on Dillon Dam Road with potential build out of that housing development would operate okay. So that is accounted in our 2045 volumes. On the concept design side, we really wanted to confirm the feasibility of the frontage road bypass. We know there's some utilities out there that we'll talk about that really constrain some of the design. We've got Draper crosses I-7, Peterbilt crosses State Highway 9 in the area. And then we wanted to really get to beyond the concept design to into like a 15% scoping level design of the whole frontage road and interchange itself. So what you see here is what we've got currently in our design. You can see we've got signals at both the westbound off ramp. Way to move this. Oh, I don't think I won't wait that. Okay. So we've got the signal at the westbound off ramp, and what we're allowed to, that provides 2 double lefts. So you have a left only and a through right left. So you get 2 left turning movements at this intersection. We're widening the bridge.
Where you at with that? Just easier now. Sorry, my reading glasses.
How my far context is.
Does that help you?
That's better, yes.
Does that look better?
Oh, there we go.
What'd you do?
That's a secret.
So the bridge between the ramps is widened. So that gives us 2 northbound left turns, a left only and a through left, so that you can access over here. Southbound is just a single leg, a little bit of realignment of the trailhead access road, and a new signal here. And then eastbound is also signalized, and we're widening the ramp to have 2 lanes. And those 2 lanes are primarily, we need the 2 lanes for right turning movements. So there'll be a right only, a through right and left. And then we do have a short left-bound turn lane through this signal here for the southbound direction. When we get down into the frontage road, you notice that the alignment has changed. It used to have a roundabout up here at the feasibility study. We're now aligning it with 10 Mile Drive on the other side. We're able to make this work vertically. We do have to relocate a sanitary sewer that runs up in the State Highway 9 fill, so that's our vertical constraint, but we've coordinated with the sewer district and we've got an alignment that works with our vertical profile of the new alignment underneath State Highway 9.
I'm sorry. If you're coming off up on the eastbound off ramp.
Yep.
And you're going to Dillon Dam Road.
Yep.
Can you make, I'll call it a left turn or a straight movement, or you have to go down around and?
You have to go down.
You said something about a through a
So,
left and a right, and I don't know what the through is.
So the through would be if you want to continue down through the intersection to go eastbound on ramp.
Oh, that's the, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And we'll show the kind of displaced movements in a sec.
I viewed that
Yeah.
road as the dam road.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, so on the eastbound off ramp, this inside lane, you can take a
Yeah,
right,
that's the
go through, or you can go left. Yeah. Perfect. And then we've got the new, so we got a roundabout. We're on the west property line of this AC hotel through the parking lot. So this is private property. I'll show that. And then it wraps around and ties in over here. The green on this is the new proposed sidewalks and paths. So we've got a lot of work still to confirm those, but We'll talk about those on a slide here in a second. And then we'll talk about this signal that we're showing at Dillon Dam and Lusher. So we are changing some of the movements here. We're removing the southbound left, the westbound left, and the eastbound left. That will now go through basically this loop. During the peak period, we mentioned there still are some congestion. So what you're seeing from the Dillon Dam 10-mile roundabout back to the west to State Highway 9 are 2 lanes coming out of the roundabout up to State Highway 9. Normal weekdays, this is just, you know, a right on red, but during peak period, when you start to get congestion on State Highway 9, this is just a 2-phase signal that almost works like a ramp meter that provide gaps so that Dillon Dam Road traffic can get out on the State Highway 9. Because without that, they're just from a stop controlled intersection, there just wouldn't be enough gaps for people to get out there. Similarly, we still do have a left-bound northbound left from State Highway 9 to Lusher. Weekday and most periods of the time, that's just going to be a free flow. When there's a gap, when there's no southbound traffic, make that left. But during peak period, weekend traffic, those gaps don't exist. So when this signal is actuated, it provides a signal phase for that left turn. But really more, it's a signal, but it's not a full movement signal. We don't have any pedestrian movements. It's really more of a ramp meter that's tied to the other 2 signals at the interchange during peak periods.
What does that look like when it's not high traffic time? Is it a blinking light?
So the left bound it'd be a permitted. So it's one that I've seen them, they go green and then it'll go flashing yellow light. You know, it's permitted. On the right turn, that would be just, you can turn right, you know, on red. And then that one would still operate, you know, we're still working through the details, how that would actuate. But it would still work. It would still have phases when cars are sitting there. But it also is a situation where if you come up to a right turn on red, you can still turn red even from a double red.
The goal of that at the Lusher Court, the light you're talking about now is to keep that traffic out of that circle.
Correct, to keep the Dillon Dam Road traffic from backing up into the roundabout, which then would back up the frontage road and you kind of get to a good standstill. So. Yeah. There we go. Just get that. All right, so we'll talk about the travel movements and then we'll go to the simulation. So this first movement here is for the displaced left turn. Right now, you can come and make a left on southbound State Highway 9 to Dillon Dam Road. This thing is going to be the bane of my existence. There we go.
You go up into the header where.
Oh, that's good. So this is the movement for the displaced left. That right now you come off and you make a left onto Dillon Dam Road. So it's free flow right turns. You make a right turn onto Lusher, through the roundabout, and then through the roundabout and on your way. Next one is for eastbound Lusher left. So if you're coming from Whole Foods and you're going up to I-70, right now you can take a left. That's going to be displaced through the loop. So go through the roundabout and 2 right turns, and then you're up to either go eastbound or westbound on I-70. And the last is the westbound Dillon Dam Road to southbound State Highway 9. And there are 2 ways this movement can work. One would be to take the loop around and make a right onto State Highway 9 and south. The other way is people might divert down 10-mile drive and then go down to another signal where you'd have to set a signal, take a left. So we can't really predict which way people are going to find their own way. There's a couple different ways. We've looked at this intersection. We've done some sensitivity modeling to assume that in one model, 80% are going to do this movement. And then the other model will say 80% are going to go down 10 miles just to understand what happens in terms of the operations. Now we will go to the simulation.
That's hours. We maintain that.
Yeah, and real quick on that, I think the other piece of the benefit there, it's quite a change, right? And we really think with the Frisco Transit Center being off Meadowville, it's gonna help all the transit providers have a much easier access back to eastbound I-70 with right turns, instead of trying to turn left onto northbound. So that's another kind of piece of this project that's gonna be attractive. If we need more funding, there's a definite transit element to this where if we get into grant proposals, let's just say we don't get our fiscal year 27 plus money, that's gonna be a reason that this is attractive. Basically because Mustang, Greyhound, Pegasus, Sun Stage, obviously, we're running out of that hub, so this is just gonna help the travel times for those routes, so. And this is really cool. This isn't done on every one of our projects, but this is, Corey can explain it better than you, but it's a visual representation of their model, right?
Yep, so this is straight out of the traffic model, so this isn't prettied up for like a public simulation. This is really what's running, and it's running on an accelerated pace, so you're basically seeing like a half hour in this 1 minute. And you know, this also want to note that this is just a background aerial. It doesn't match the geometry exactly because our alignment's over here. But if you view in, you can kind of see that the signal phase, like the speed right turns that come out and then are allowed to go up. And this is our peak period, Saturday afternoon. So you'll see the signal phase up here at eastbound off ramp. And then the 2-phase signal here at Dillon Dam and Lusher, and also the signal up here. So we just kind of let it loop a few times. You can kind of zoom in, and I can't zoom in on this specific, but you can focus in and kind of see where you start to see a little bit of backup. You'll see some backup on here, but then it'll flush out.
Does automated technology monitor the green, are all the lights coordinated with themselves with, I don't know what you call them now, we used to call them trippers, but
Yeah, these will all be interconnected to kind of the signal timing will work with each other.
based on time or based on visual, it's looking at the traffic at the moment and.
We will have
adjusting?
cameras. We haven't gotten really into that detail right now. When we're running at 2045, we're just having the signals optimized. So once it goes into play in an opening year, the signal timing will be set, and we will have cameras to detect, you know, where cars are and cues start to get to.
Yeah, and mostly, my question is more what can be done as opposed to what are you gonna do here?
Right.
I'm not-
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities now with cameras and actuation to understand when you get a play to.
And that's what we're doing in Silverthorne right now. There's, I think, 4 different new timing plans for the whole corridor based on counts. And so there's like a mud season on either end, and then there's like a peak season. And so those signal timing plans rely on that interconnect between the signals and then actual counts coming off the cameras. So it's kind of complicated, but something similar could happen here for sure.
Is it the westbound off ramp actuated by a camera as well to let folks get out of there if it starts to get backed up, or is that just going to be dealt with timing?
It'll have both. It'll have a camera to understand when vehicles are sitting there. And then, but it will start likely with a timing plan that'll be tweaked.
It's like a Nest thermostat to me.
Right.
Getting smarter.
Yeah.
It is pretty amazing, the southbound 2 lanes, though. I mean, you can definitely see, you can't see that far down the east or the westbound off ramp, but you can see how much traffic is moving 2 lanes over the bridge, which is a huge change.
Yeah, the amount of traffic in the peak hours, like 1,300 vehicles coming off the westbound off ramp. It's significant amount that luckily it's only competing with the northbound movement, which is like 400 vehicles. So
Corey, so this is a simulation of this January's traffic.
this is the 2045 out here in a Saturday ski season afternoon, like a roughly 2 to 3 to 4 time frame.
What's the rough grade gonna look like from that Dam Road intersection up to the eastbound ramp? Like how much, to get the underpass and everything else, how much is it gonna change from existing?
We're matching pretty close. We're within a couple feet for this roundabout here at Dillon Dam. Dillon Dam starts to get steep north of here. There's actually kind of a low point that works out well for this roundabout. And then you'll really have unchanged, the State Highway 9 grade would be unchanged from today.
It's at one point in there with this signaling, the eastbound cars are stopped there, like they start backing up, they back up on the dam road and then they all do flush out, but I'm just thinking that winter time. Good tires and everything else that everybody has in their rentals when. Right. Nobody's trying to get started again from their second stop.
Yep, yeah, that's the nice thing is that
That grades now.
this grade will be about the same as it is today. So the grade down is probably our steepest grade on the frontage road system. The new frontage road, I think the steepest grade is about 3%, relatively flat. Mountain corridor, and then really the steepest grades will continue to be the State Highway 9 up to westbound, which is about 6%.
On a good day, I can hit 4 traffic lights on the way to Safeway.
Yeah,
So does all this then intertwine.
well, so there is that, one thing we found is by expanding our study limit south, there is still congestion on State Highway 9 that sort of meters the amount of traffic that gets into the interchange. Down at Han Road or Han Drive. So right now, we're not looking at any improvements as part of this project down there. So you still have some congestion down there.
Are all the access point, well, I'll let you finish and then we'll go to.
No, sorry, yeah.
Any other questions on this simulation? I'll go back to the.
As long as it works just like that, we should. I think the capital.
Be driving.
27 years.
Well, yeah, 2045 is a hard year to predict in terms of what is traffic gonna be doing with autonomous vehicles. And so that's a really big wild card in my mind on all this 20-year horizon planning. And so it's the best information we have. And that's what the FHWA, the feds require for interchange modifications is a 20-year planning horizon. So we have a statewide growth model that we're using, and then we've got checking it with local knowledge like the Lake Hill projects.
Yeah, and in addition to making sure we have the current potential maximum number of units at Lake Hill, we also applied those PM, it's from basically a traffic Institute of Traffic Engineers kind of per unit traffic volume that comes out of that. And in our Saturday peak hour, we put the highest PM counts into that, and likely if that's workforce housing, that traffic is not going to be using it as much during that peak period because of workforce housing. So we're being as conservative as we can on that analysis. All right, so the next we'll talk about some of the paths. So right here, we don't have them highlighted. The green is the path, so path systems that we're showing. So make sure we understand we are not showing a crossing here. There is an existing crossing here, but we don't want to put that signal timing in because that timing of a pedestrian movement really has a lot of delay that we've taken kind of the large measures to take that out of the intersection. So we are providing continuous and a grade separation path system. So connecting to the existing path system here, up to the roundabouts, crossing on the south side, we've got a 10-foot multi-use path on the east side that then comes across the roundabout here and ties into the existing paths over here on Meadows on the south side and on the west side and into the transit center. Right now here on Dillon Dam, we're showing paths on both sides. This is a communication coordination effort with the town. I want to talk. We know the master plan shows a connection. We generally show west side. We're sort of assuming it's on the south side, just where it would connect. It would be nice if we didn't have the path on this side, just because you can have a lot of heavy right turning movements. So if you keep it opposite that, you just reduce conflicts. And then we are showing right now, and this is another coordination issue or element of, sorry to see the mouse, of extending what is not there right now, a path on the north side over to this intersection where the gas station and the hotel are, and there's this mid-block crossing. So there'd be a path on both sides, and then this continues up in a multi-use 10-foot wide path across I-70, terminating at the trailhead access. And then we've got a connection between State Highway 9 and the frontage road path, so you have full grade separation movement, so you can get around without having to cross State Highway 9. So we got some coordination with the town and just specifics of that, but that's where we are with the multi-use path right now. And then, you know, we're at about 15% design, so we've got a lot of refinement. Won't get into all these in detail. We're still refining some of the laneage into the roundabouts. You know, we've kind of looked at, do we need a right turn bypass here or not? Similarly, do we need a right turn bypass so that we don't get backups, because there's actually a heavy movement going over into the Whole Foods development. We know there's additional units being built over there. We've got some access modifications to both hotels that we've got to discuss and coordinate as part of the right-of-way process. And then, as I mentioned, we need to coordinate on the sidewalk configuration and just the configuration in general on the Lusher stretch between State Highway 9 and the access here. So we're moving forward. We're at about 15%. We'll be moving into a 30%. We'll continue to kind of refine this design. Mentioned that we do need to get right of way. So a lot of this fits within CDOT right of way, which is great, but there is definitely a need to get across the two private properties here. We've situated this as much as we can on the west side of this AC Marriott Hotel here. This permanent property that is needed. So it'd be some from this hotel and a little sliver from this hotel. We also need some from Summit County on the transit station parcel. And then there's a couple others that as we update our right-of-way mapping, we don't think we'll actually need just some sliver parcels. Just once we get final title work, they'll fall off. So a little one here, and it's just a GIS right-of-way data. Same thing on the Common property. Additionally, we'll need some construction easements to construct the project. And potentially a little sliver access or right-of-way over here on 10 Mile, depending on the path. So that's something that we'll confirm by 30%, so we go into the right-of-way process.
And you do that, like, is that the hotel's property?
It's a hotel property, so CDOT will have to
Purchase it?
acquire it through the Uniform Act. And then there will be also, in addition to the land property, there's going to be some damages because their parking lot's going to have some impact. So there'll be a damage cost to them to make their property as whole as they can from the acquisition.
I think it wasn't too bad, but we were really concerned with that, how many parking spaces they might lose. And it was less than 10.
Yeah, it was like in the 5 or 6, and some of that comes into how do you just make it reconfigured.
So we won't get into that until we have environmental clearance for this job. And that's kind of the trigger that allows us to go start doing our formal right-of-way acquisition. We also can't do that, I don't think, unless we have full funding in place. So there's a lot of steps there before we get into a formal acquisition process. So just to note, that's going to take a while. If we have willing parties, it goes quick. It can be over 18 months just through our federal process for right-of-way acquisitions.
And you've communicated already with both those property owners, so at least.
I think it's on the radar. There weren't very many negative comments at all. So, but once, you know, we have a much sharper pencil with actual impacts, then sometimes those conversations change. So we'll see.
Yep, and to go through some of the meetings we got upcoming and kind of milestones. So big picture schedule, we're at 15% design review, and that's really line and grade feasibility. Between now and this fall, we'll go to 30% design. So that's where we're really honing in the design to really set that right-of-way limit. And then this ROPR, which is a right-of-way plan review meeting, is early next year. As Grant mentioned, we have to have our NEPA, our environmental clearance, done to actually start buying the right-of-way. So we've got a couple things that have to come together before the acquisition can start, but we'll start on the right-of-way plans and get that ready. And then the plan is for 90% design review meeting, either in one package or two next spring. We mentioned we could go fix the interchange right now. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't need right-of-way, so that could move forward without right-of-way. Acquisition being completely done. And then an advertisement potentially fall of 2024 or winter of 2025, depending if it goes as one project or two. So we've had our first kickoff meeting with the PLT for this project. We identified some kind of issues task force or specialty meetings. One of them is meeting this summer with all the adjacent businesses to give them a look-see at the project, talk through the issues, and meet specifically with some of them that are going to have right-of-way impacts. And then we've got plans for a pedestrian bicycle transit issues task force meeting, just to get some input on the sidewalk connections. We've talked through a Summit Stage, some of the buses that they'd be running through there. So I want to make sure that those operate well through the roundabouts. And then we've got a whole host of meetings that will continue on with the PLT that are tied to some of the design reviews, the 30% and on from there. That's the presentation we have. So we're open for any questions, and we can bring slides back up if you have specifics.
Couple points I want to just not forget before it goes too much further. So the NEPA class of action, right now we're thinking this is a categorical exclusion, which is the lowest level of NEPA review by the feds. Fingers crossed that it stays that way. If it kicks it into the next level, which is an EA, it's going to be a little bit more documentation work. In either case, we're going to have to do a noise study like we did for eastbound Oxley, but really that's kind of the biggest impact, I think, to our different resources that we're seeing is potential noise and if there's mitigation required. And so good news, like there's not really wildlife impacts, wetlands, that kind of stuff. And we're doing an improvement to our trail system. So yeah, we think it's going to go well, but we're just getting started on this.
Yeah, no real major bugs and bunnies. Historic resources don't look to be out there. So really is the noise study and just the documentation.
Grant, is there safe passage upgrades going on at Ox Lane? That was a discussion point at one time.
For wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're putting in all the fence. So yeah, CPW, US Forest Service, everybody concurred with the fencing, I think.
Is that part of that or is that a separate? I thought
Yeah,
it
the
was all
posts
tied
are almost in. So
Yeah.
yeah, we've got.
I try not to look over there.
Yeah, don't look too. The fence is gonna be a huge safety improvement, right? I think council members White that smashed a moose and I just saw a deer the other day. We've had elk, we've had mountain lions and bears, and so that'll be huge, but no crossings. They're gonna have to cross somewhere else, but hopefully it's got better sight distance rather than going down the hills.
Cool.
Traffic slower to 205, they can go down there.
I mean, we've seen elk, we've seen 30 elk go under the bridges at 205, so it's kind of weird that they make their way, but they also cross the bridges.
Do we have any idea of what kind of traffic closures throughout the construction process are going to take place? And then does that redirect everybody down Main Street? And you know, how often and how's that gonna happen?
You know, the biggest intrusion, at least at the interchange, would be, well, really both bridges, the widening and the new bridge. The widening, luckily, it's wide enough that we can push over to the east side, similar to what's being done on the bridges down by 205. And then the main, like any full closure is going to be nighttime setting girders. So there will be some nighttime kind of redirects for that bridge work. State Highway 9 bridge, it's going to be a little bit wider with the trail, so it can be phased, but it is going to likely, you'll be one southbound lane through there, and it's one phase, so it's going to be a little restricted. But it's also likely it's a top-down construction and it's new, so it's going to be a little quicker than the steel girders because it's going to be kind of like the bridge right now. The concept we have is the bridge of a 211, which is side-by-side girders, so it's a little quicker construction.
Good.
Whether it's done as one project or two, it's gonna probably be 2 summers worth of
2 summers.
at least, yeah.
But I mean, the gas relocation, Excel's got to move the high pressure gas on their own cost, and that's got to get done before we start. So they could also be a critical path if they're not out of our way.
That's true.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
They have to move it at their.
If we would have had to pay for it, has to do with when it was put in, the other date came in after. They never got it. So it was kind of luck, kind of maybe a miss in the 60s, but they know that they're used to relocating this and maybe it's a benefit to them. Anyway, so.
Great.
But it's high pressure, so it's not. It's in, I think the other utility piece will go with the project doing sanitary. It's a huge constraint on our vertical clearance at our underpass, but sounds like Corey's got it figured out. He's been talking to the same district. And if we have to upsize a little bit for Lake Hill, I think we're in the trench anyway. If it's a 12-inch pipe or a 15-inch pipe, it doesn't work. So
Yeah. And that related to the sanitary, there could be a day or two closing, because when you cut over a new sanitary, you got a bypass pump and sanitary line crosses Dillon Dam. So there's could be some intermittent closures on Dillon Dam Road too, when you tie in the roundabout and the sanitary.
Yeah, but it's not like
Shut down.
summer.
No, extended closures, yeah.
I would estimate impacts are real similar to the Main Street and Water Dams project. That went over 2 seasons. You know, we built the underpass to the wreck. To the peninsula, right, under traffic, and there were some days of delay, but our biggest problem with that was they're running the Bills Ranch. So we're gonna see the question about Main Street reroutes, and we're not gonna probably ever advertise that. It's gonna happen, so we'll have to deal with it. So there's not gonna be zero impacts, but I don't see it too different than what our experience on it. That's good.
Couple fascinating ones. I mean, first off, I started with Madison said we're going to talk for a minute about how we got here, and then we'll talk about where we're going. How we got here is not even that relevant. It's just really exciting that we're here. So thank you for getting us to here, and hopefully it keeps on going. The difference between traffic now and traffic 2045. Where's the expectation that is it pass through traffic coming from the Front Range? Is it all, where's that coming from?
I think it's general growth. So when the feasibility study was done, it looked at a couple of things, and this was CDOT has a statewide model now that kind of ties in all the other regional models. That was not ready at that time, so we looked at the growth factors that like the programmatic EIS used, the State Highway 9 our EIS used. And then we looked at, you look at population estimates for counties in the out years, and it kind of factored in a growth factor. So it's not specific to any one location. It's specific to what you're seeing over time on I-70, what you're seeing in the populations to get to just a regional factor. And we're a little higher than now the statewide, CDOT statewide plan model is updated. Our growth factor for the project is a little higher than that. They're going through another process to kind of update to a 2050 year. So it's just sort of all the traffic.
Okay.
All the traffic that's been growing on I-70, all the growth that's been happening in communities.
It's interesting. I share my concern, which is once they clean up Floyd Hill, all that's going to do is allow more water to go in the pipe.
Right,
And,
right.
The good news is
I'm not sure what we've solved for the rest of the pipe by making it bigger in the front line. But you guys are smart. I think Andy said, or you mentioned access points. There will be right of way impacts. Are you planning to close off any of the rights of way on either a permanent or a temporary basis?
There is, so right now, and this is one we've got to talk with town staff and the hotel, there's 2 accesses into their parking lot. Right now, one would go away, this one would be expanded, so there'd still be 2 accesses into the hotel. You have the existing one on the east side and this one. So we've got to talk through this with town staff and the hotel. On the Alpine Inn, right now, there's a full movement, you go in and out right here. We have 2 concepts. One would be a proposed just right in, so this is just an in only. because you're so close to the roundabout, and then the one to the west would still be in and out. Or this could move a little bit west and you could reconfigure some of the parking spaces to have in and out there.
Nothing on Highway 9.
Nothing on Highway 9 in terms of, just the reductions at Lusher, Dillon.
And then somewhere up there, I'm sorry to be rapid fire, but somewhere on there, you had a 23 to 27, which kind of in timeframe.
Okay, so that's the funding in the CDOT 10-year plan.
I just want to clarify, that doesn't mean this is a 5-year construction project.
No, this is just the years that the way CDOT shows it in their funding plan of when funding is available.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, that's a really good point. I want to clarify a little bit. The 25 million that's set aside in fiscal year 23 through 26 in the 10-year plan, that is programmed money. So that's real dollars that we're going to be able to budget. That's why we're kind of gaining momentum. But the 19 million in fiscal year 27 plus is, I think, listed as, it's not planned, it's like, maybe I have that backwards. It's one column's funded, so probably the first 23 through 26 funded, and the other column 27 plus is planned. So we were in a meeting last week with our executive director, and there wasn't a clear answer on when that column's going to shift to funded. So that's a big deal for me.
Grant, I can try to help with that too, real quick.
Yeah, if Kim wants to weigh in on that.
So I think just to add on to what Grant was saying, so, we program the 10-year plan every 4 years. And like he mentioned, the money in the FY 23 to 26 column is guaranteed and we're allowed to start spending that. And right now, just, CDOT fiscal year is July to July. We're getting ready to finish up our FY 23. We're getting into FY 24. So we're getting close to the middle of that 4-year plan. We still need to program what the funds will look like FY 27 to FY 31, essentially the next 4 years. And, what's interesting is we just don't know what that dollar value will be that we will be able to program in that next 4 years. We'll probably find out in the next year or two, but we're not sure that every project in that FY 27 column will be in FY 27 to 31. There might now be this FY 32 plus column that some projects get moved into. And so I think we'll learn a lot more in the next few years. But I think the most important thing is just to, stay in touch with your TPR and to make sure that when we do go through that process in the next year or two, that we do advocate for this project. And I honestly think that the fact that we're already having a project and we just want to finish this project will be a good argument to try to finish this up. So just, that's why Grant was saying, we know we have the 25 million, the 19 million is not guaranteed. There's a chance it could be in the FY 32 plus column. We really want it to be in the 27 to 31. And if it is in the 27 to 31 column, that means it's available to us as early as July of 25, which is FY 26, but we can advance a year usually. So I think, long story short, just know that when the next planning effort comes, we'll have to advocate for this project.
And I want to add, though, that I'll say this, I guess, from an FHWA, Federal Highways perspective, they're going to consider these two phases as connected, for lack of a better term. So they're not exclusive. One can't work without the other. So once we go for phase one, we're basically committed to building phase two. They're not going to let phase two slide because the interchange is dependent on the frontage road bypass.
I guess one more. Sorry. I think if you poll the knowledgeable people, involved people, stakeholders in Lake Hill, you're going to get, and the question being, what's the likelihood this is going to happen? You're going to get anywhere from 0 to 100. Can you address kind of how does the creation of Lake Hill impact the likelihood of this project, and how does the likelihood of this project put pressure on certain segments of the community to push Lake Hill?
I think they're separate projects. I look at them completely separate. Like if Lake Hill wasn't going to happen, we would still have And if Lake Hill happens, we can accommodate the traffic is what we kind of finally got to in the last month, so.
Yeah, you notice just in our existing conditions, Dillon Dam was already starting to operate with like a lot of operational issues. So even without that Lake Hill growth in the 20-year plan, just with the 20-year general growth, that intersection is going to fail.
And is it okay to be saying, like you said, they're almost unrelated concepts. We can't use Lake Hill as a push to make, if there's ever to advocate for this project, you can't use Lake Hill, and Lake Hill can't say, well, they're doing the project, so you have to have that. Okay. That's really helpful to hear, because this is really important and that's really controversial.
Yeah, there's some tweaks that we're doing to that roundabout to accommodate that extra traffic, but it's, in my world, it's pretty minor.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to it didn't drive us to have the 2 rights coming out. That has to happen no matter what. Like the 2 rights and the signal at State Highway 9 from Dillon Dam Road. That's not being driven by Lake Hill. That's just part of the general traffic.
And there was a meeting with CDOT at the county last week. Was this the same presentation, same messaging?
Yeah,
We didn't have the presentation, but
Generally.
generally this project leadership team is involving all the players, so, yeah, I think we're just gonna progress on. We're relying on the PLT members to communicate back to their groups on after every meeting, and so they represent those interests. We're gonna have to tie into the bike and trails folks and make sure we're connecting, but yeah, I think everybody's kind of on the same page. I think our bigger issue with growth is probably in Silverthorne, the numbers we're seeing. Talking state demographers numbers versus actual plan developments in Silverthorne is far different, so. But that also impacts up here, right? Like they are, Smith Ranch and the rest of it is blowing up Highway 6 and 9, and that's gonna trickle out over here, and so. It's all connected, and that's why I think the answer about background growth is a good one, right? We can't predict what's gonna go where, but overall, we know traffic's increasing, and so the wild card is technology, because a lot of people say self-driving cars reduces the need for capacity improvements in the future, but that's a big unknown right now.
Has there been, as part of the planning on that, on a highway shutdown day, like where all the trucks going?
Yeah, that's kind of a whole separate interstate plan, but we're working on that pretty hard at 205. We made some tweaks this winter, but really the idea is incident management, holding trucks in Dotsero so they can't get here.
Right.
Along that, we do have semis load up behind Walmart. And whatever, if there's closures and or for no reason at all, they just go back there because it's somewhere to go.
And I think the eastbound lane that we're building now is we added 6 CMB parking at the east overlook. And then the shoulder's getting wider all the way down the hill, so there's gonna be storage on the right shoulder now that's not there today. And then with operational changes, they're letting those trucks pass the closure point so they can stack up at the 206 in the chain up area and occupy all the closed lanes. So that's a big change that we gotta keep really pushing, because then they won't end up in Frisco or Silverthorne. That'll just sit on the interstate.
Right. And then one other thing, if we can, do we need to make improvements or updates to 10 Mile to tie into this? So like, do we have a vision of how that would be or not? Or we may need to.
Here I speak about future capital stuff.
But you'll be in charge of it.
That's the plan. I think the main focus is gonna be the missing connection that we have on southbound Highway 9. Because we're hoping to do that connection from home to Walmart. We need to shore up our backbone connectivity. I think that's first on the priority list before we start reanalyzing our existing assets. That's gonna come, but that's first on the docket for that type of stuff. Myself and Tom are gonna work with CDOT to just make sure what does get installed for the project works well with what we have existing.
And then, does that lead us into the next gap, the rest of the gap? You know, from Main Street to this, or are you guys planning on anything in the future for that, or is that all on us to do sidewalk?
Not right now.
Yeah, okay.
And I think one of the things that Grant brought up that we talked a lot about with the county, with the Director Lou there as well, is the mass transit portion of it and how successful all of those Mustang, Pegasus and everything else. I think it ties into what we're working on with some sort of micro transit within town. And as odd as it sounds, those actually connect pretty directly to this project and helping potentially Frisco's Voice, helping get funding, helping move this ahead for at least that second round. And or conversely getting us maybe potentially more grant money to try to get that going to complement what CDOT's already got in place. Director Luna had some good conversations around that. And so I think just, you know, to kind of wrap it up, I just think on top of, I agree with Andy's enthusiasm that this is great to happen, but I think if you look at the scope of what we've done between, you know, the housing granite block or granite park and everything we're doing with housing and working with you on that and everything we've done with the GAP project in Iron Springs to this, I think this is one of the better intergovernmental relationships that I'm aware of. And I just really appreciate that from all of you. And Grant, I know you live here and you see it and take the brunt of it sometimes, but I just really appreciate how well we've always been open and communicate. And I think it's led to better projects across the board. So I think that's pretty exciting. And I think this will only get better as we get closer to making it happen.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think partnerships are what brought all those projects to the, you know, reality. And so if we can keep partnerships in mind, like the county, town, and see that we can do a lot of things. This is a $45 million construction effort, and so it's going to take partners for sure. So.
Just to that point, right? And with just speaking of funding, right? Like if we have, I just want to be collaborative and share all that stuff. Like I want to use your plan to get our grant and you take our plan for your grant. Just to take it a one step.
Yeah, no, that's how it works for sure.
Yeah.
Like we got the grant for the underpass, you know, I think just because we all have the same goals. Yeah.
Great, Corey. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys. That was great.
Yeah.
Golf course.
Scott too. I don't even. I just worry you do great. Corey's got the cool little video. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Quick turnover. We'll break the lane finish up and take 5.
Yes.
More girls. I'm gonna go over here.
Nicely also.
Get rolling now that everybody's got a plate of delicious Thai food from a local restaurant, which is long overdue, and I think I've already been there a couple times. Sounds like others have as well. So, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it's long overdue. I know we try to do this at least once a year to bring planning commission in to meet with council so we can catch up, make sure we're all hearing the same things on the same page. Help be clear in council's direction for planning commission to kind of know, what we're doing, what we expect, what we're trying to accomplish to make your jobs as commissioners easier and clearer as well. Because I know in the past we haven't always made it the easiest and maybe even sent messages that direction. So I know that Emily's worked hard with the rest of planning department to kind of come up with an agenda. So we're not just sitting here picking away at our own favorite topics, but we can kind of focus more on what's in the pipeline, what's in the future, and kind of the concerns that definitely Emily and team have seen or see coming, so we can make sure that we discuss those, get on the same page the best we can. I think for me, this is the best chance for us to ask those questions that either side sits back and wonders, why did that happen? How did we get here? How can we do better? Just for our own efficiency's sake and better outcome, but for all those folks that we serve in the town and the community. That's the goal of this. Does anybody I think everybody should know each other, right? I think we've all been here since we appointed everyone one way or another. So I think we can then just jump right in. So Emily, it's all yours. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. As Hunter said, we have a general agenda for tonight, just to try to make sure we cover the topics that have been brought up in the last several months and what staff has been hearing is important for you all to discuss. So I'll provide a general overview background on these topics, but really leave the discussion up to you. I'm here to answer any questions. However, really, like I said, the discussion is up to you, and we're generally looking at where staff should be focusing our energy. So that's what we're hoping to gain out of this conversation. So we have direction moving forward, what you all would like to see and what you think is working and what you think is not working. So with that, first on the agenda, we have a discussion on inclusionary zoning. This is an affordable housing approach that has been brought up in various conversations with the Planning Commission and Town Council. And as staff, we'd like to learn whether this is an approach that you all are interested in and whether we should keep researching and analyzing what that would mean. So a general definition, according to the Colorado Division of Housing, inclusionary housing ordinances are locally implemented zoning policies that mandate certain number or percentage of affordable housing units to be added into new market rate developments. So there are a variety of cities and towns throughout Colorado that have versions of inclusionary housing ordinances. These have been challenged, but the state has a bill that was passed that essentially states and affirms that the municipalities have the authority to implement new or promote the construction of new affordable housing with new development and redevelopment. This authority is only justified if the local government has taken previous actions such as granting density bonuses or permitting more than one dwelling unit per lot. And all of these are listed in the bill. There was a link provided in your separate. So this is just a very high level example of what other municipalities have done. For example, we have Telluride, which uses a mitigation rate formula to determine the square footage of affordable development required for each new residential and non-residential development. And then in comparison, like Longmont requires just 12% across the board flat rate, 12% of new residential, no non-residential development is required to be affordable. And affordable to Longmont means homes sold at or below 80% AMI and units rented at or below 50% AMI. So really, I just wanted to show a comparison here that it's different for each town, each city. and what works for them and what they define as, affordable in their community. And then, as is typical with inclusionary housing ordinances, towns and cities generally have allowed methods of providing these affordable units. So that could be the physical construction, on-site, off-site. It could be deed restricting an existing market rate unit, ADUs, payment in lieu of construction. So again, just a variety of options that different cities and towns have chosen to do. And I did just want to include one more example. Crested View actually adopted their resident occupied affordable housing policy in 2013. So that requires affordable housing mitigation with each new residential and non-residential development. And this is their map from 2022. They currently have 313 deed restricted units, which accounts for 25% of their housing stock. So I just wanted to show this as a visual of what 10 years down the line may look like. They've done a pretty good job at keeping track of where these deed restrictions are and what type of units they are as well.
Question, sure. Does 313 are post inclusionary housing?
I guess I don't know what they had in 2013, but they've had that for several years. Okay, and this is where we are at in Frisco. So generally, there's 3,600 units in Frisco, or dwelling units in Frisco. That's an approximate number. But there are 184 deed restricted units, so 19 of which are town owned. So that's what we have right now. And then Sally created this map to show the development since 2020. So these are all highlighted approved planning projects. Not all of them have been constructed, but they have been approved since 2020. And with that, we have 123 residential dwelling units, 36 deed restricted units. So definitely an increase, but 22 of those are with the Granite Park development. So as you know, that's the town and CDOT developments, and then 14 are from private developers. And generally, these are the bonus density incentive that we see in play. And one thing to note on this map, we sorted out the types of projects and how many deed restricted units. So you can generally see that the developments that were 3 to 5 units really didn't result in developers being able to utilize that or wanting to utilize that bonus density incentive. It comes into play on more of those larger scale projects, 9 units being one of them, 30 and 36.
Do you know how many remaining units of density, like based off of this, are still there, like underlying remaining? Left in Frisco, I think like at the community plan, there was like 1,000 left.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Just a quick point of clarification, I guess, because I do recall the one at that end of Main Street, I think it's 36 units, the other one is 30 units. I thought those were conditional use permits, so they were sort of like in negotiation for allowing this,
So
a different use, and that's how we got there.
the 80 West Main project does have the bonus density. That was part of the project. The Lusher Court was not a bonus density incentive. That was a conditional. Well, there wasn't actually conditional use at the end of that project. That was something that the developer offered throughout the process.
Okay.
But the 80 West Main is definitely the bonus density. It was 2 deed restricted or 4 deed restricted units.
I think I know we have that number because I know we did it in one of our water build out studies.
Okay.
Is what is the density, max density we would have at full build out per lot. I just can't.
Yeah, and I was like, was it 1,000 or 4,000, but I know it was a high number. Yeah.
It was 1,000 when I was on.
That's okay, that's what that, when we did the community plan update.
And that was filled out.
Yeah, with everything
And that was
taken
along
down.
with the Water, as far as that was all the water rights we had.
Okay.
We support that, yeah.
Emily, I have a question, and tell me if this is too detailed, but right, the ADU scenario sounds awesome. But here in town, if you own a structure that doesn't currently have one, you're looking at $40,000 before you even look at construction costs with tap fees. How do other communities deal with that?
different communities do different things. I think I should have done this research before, but I think REC requires that ADUs be deed restricted, or is that correct?
They do, but we're still not conquering those tap fees
For REC or for us?
for us.
For us, yeah, I'll go over ADUs in just a little bit
Sure.
and then kind of
Sounds great.
compare. Right, and that's what we've seen is generally residents who select a lock-off situation because of the affordability and the ease of doing that rather than an ADU.
Are we moving beyond?
Whatever you-
Yeah, I know.
View of what we have here in Frisco, so including, they're not, it's not a linear conversation, so I can show what we have and then allow you all to discuss.
Okay.
I can go back to anything, I can stay here if you would like, but I think we'll go through, okay. Okay, so these are our overview of existing programs, our deed restrictions that you all have seen. We have Housing Helps, which is a buy down program. There's no resale caps and no AMI restrictions. There's been 7 total purchases since 2021. And then we have our bonus density deed restrictions. So those are what we were talking about with those developers getting those bonus densities. They're required to have a deed restriction that's based at 100% AMI. We have 29 existing of those. And then we have our new affordable housing bonus density ordinance that you all were a part of and have seen recently. So that actually allows double the allowed density. And currently we are processing 1 application with that. So we don't have a lot to go off of on how successful or not it has been in our community, but it is a new program. And then we have the Frisco Housing Locals, and that was the town entering into master leases with residents and finding the tenants to put into those locations. It hasn't been super successful. It was only offered to town employees and limited options with that. And so as of July, there will be no further properties within that program.
Sorry, can we go back to that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Under bonus density, so you have 29 existing, 4 pending at 80 West Main. But wasn't the 22 at Granite Park, wasn't that a bonus density too? Or
I didn't
didn't
include that
okay.
because of the
extra different category?
it
Okay.
was kind of a different category of that. But
On housing locals, a wise man once said that we can't just add, we need to subtract. Is this a good time to lay that program down?
that could be a recommendation that you provide and talk about.
Okay.
it's
It's not being used and it occupies time, space and ink.
Right. And as far as I know, none of the leases are being renewed as of July. I don't know if anyone has provided interest in, opting into that program thus far, but the existing ones are no longer.
Another wise person once said that we need to do a better job of telling our community the programs. Really a question of if they know about it and not using it, we should have a lay it down conversation. And if they aren't using it but need it,
And
we should have a
I do
PR
think,
conversation.
sure, I know what it is. So I actually used it, I had housing all through the town, I still do, but I was in an ADU, the town had a lease with Omni, and then they had a lease with the property owner. I paid rent to the town paid a specific dollar that was
More than you can.
Offset.
right. But it just.
So subsidized rental program.
Right, yeah, just. It's,
Those are all one big thing.
right, yeah, it was all private residence, right, no, not.
Dude.
Where did the town own units?
Yeah, gotcha.
This or they.
I didn't include it in that. These are more just the deed restrictions and
Gotcha.
whether or not they include AMI or not. So now we have ADUs versus lockoff. So how our UDC defines an ADU, it's a second subordinate unit on the same lot as the primary dwelling unit. Really, the key distinction between an ADU and a lockoff in our code are cooking facilities, or is whether or not it has a cooking area. A lockoff is not allowed to have cooking facilities, and therefore they don't have additional sewer and water tap fees. ADUs also have other standards. They can't be larger than 900 square feet, cannot be subdivided, cannot be short-term rented, limit to 1 ADU per principal dwelling, and then is counted as a unit of density. So that's one of the things that gets some owners caught up is if their lot is not allocated the density, it does not work for them unless they choose to deed restrict it, then they are exempted from that density requirement. So those are the differences between ADUs and lockups here in Frisco. And it's been a little hard to monitor in Frisco. Typically, we see illegal dwelling units are caught when the property ownership changes, or they come in for a building permit that's unrelated to the unit and we see it, or it's listed in the short-term rental listing. And so it's a little bit difficult to go back and track what is there. But generally with the discussion of property owners, they opt for the lockups because it's cheaper and more accessible and, just a little bit easier to have in their house.
Is an ADU deed restricted?
It doesn't have to be. So if your lot is allocated the density, you can add the ADU. If not, you can get that density bonus and
Deed restricted.
Deed restricted,
So
yeah.
for it to be exempt from density, it needs to be deed restricted.
correct.
But
So-
then, go ahead.
No, please.
If, like, there's nothing in the code to say that, like, you could do a lockup with actually had kitchen options if you made it deed restricted? Is that anything we have or?
Mhm.
Didn't think so.
Cause it really, making it the dwelling unit is what, you're adding a dwelling unit, with that, the livable, the habitable space. So our lockup is defined as short-term habitation,
So
not meant for long-term. And then with that additional unit, that's why we charge the tap fees, because they're using it as a dwelling unit.
So you can rent a lockup just less than 30 days or whatever. That can.
We don't actually define that, but it's meant for short.
Long-term rented?
I mean,
Yeah, that seems like it
Why
could be a
not?
good option.
yeah, we don't have
Like,
any.
why don't we change that?
Yeah.
Right, and
That
so
is
that's
definitely
what we're looking, what are your general thoughts on what's working and what's not working and what you'd like to explore more of with.
And Emily, this is where I'm gonna punt this to Andy, because he's gonna know what I'm saying and can explain it better. I'm sorry to Drew.
Oh, no,
No.
yeah.
Which one?
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The good Andy.
Right. Dragon it.
How can we make a unit like above your garage into some sort of livable space without costing $40,000 to get a tap fee and a sewer fee?
Well, those weren't designed, so there's no sewer or water to those.
Right.
So that would, I mean, frankly, I think that you have to have that tap to make that a livable unit. I think, I don't see how you do it without it, but maybe there's something where an ADU is at a different rate. Maybe that's, to your point.
I don't have an answer, yeah.
If the tap fees are what's keeping people from building ADUs, then let's attack that. But yeah, I don't, like, what's above our garages.
Just as an example.
Yeah, some of them, there's quite a bit of space up there, but I don't think, well, first of all, I think it was written into our PUD or whatever, our governing documents that nobody could do that ever, no matter even if you could make.
I think the way it was written is no water would be brought to those buildings, and that's how they got around it without zoning it that way. And I think that's unwindable, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But then you butt up against the tap fee situation.
That's.
I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing it to the group. If there's 7 in our neighborhood potentially?
Of those garages,
Uh-huh.
of those garage units, the people that went for the extra height in the garage, yeah,
Yeah.
at least.
Well, I feel like lockups, there's like big basements where I'm like, this could be a very livable space if they had a kitchen and then you're not dealing with tap fees and.
Yeah.
Different municipalities and organizations that aren't gonna grant those and waive those fees. It's like, can we change this so you can put a dwelling unit or a kitchen in there if you rent to a local?
Can we subsidize tap fees for that?
Can
part
you-
accessory dwelling?
Yeah, why not? Can you do that?
You
Transfer
can
to private.
subsidize tap fees and I would, my advice to you would be you must. You can't charge a differential fee to different users to tap into the.
Or
water
just
system.
waive the fee. Somebody's gotta pay the fee.
Somebody's gotta
Otherwise you're
pay the
not keeping your.
You totally have to pay the fees, otherwise I'd be a hypocrite.
Reimburse yourself at private,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we do.
The other thing that's keeping people from doing ADUs is that there's. Right, like if I can do something and like maybe rent it out, nobody's really gonna know. And I don't have to do anything, I can call it a lockup, oh no, it was short-term lease or
And
whatever.
people will literally
Back
pull
to
their
their
stoves out and put a
lockup,
cabinet in,
the code
do the walkthrough and put it back in.
Is another reason people are not gonna do an ADU.
And I think if we let people put kitchens in, maybe less of a fire hazard too, people sneaking in.
Yeah, but you'd have to only
So-
allow that if it was rented and put a deed on your lockup.
Right.
Right, but if it was rented long term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on your local, you can put a kitchenette.
Not available.
You can get a
Not for
permit.
short term.
Yeah, I mean,
Is the ADU problem, I mean, okay, is it the fact that you gotta put up 40,000 up front? Or is it, because it should pencil out?
And there are
I
very,
mean, the reason you're creating is an ADU is so you can collect $2,000 a month in rent.
Well, but they're 900 square feet max. So it seems to me like the cost of that tap fee is, you don't have a lot of economy of scale there. You're spreading out a big tap fee over a small amount of square feet, so that makes that expensive square footage to
But
build.
they're paying the same tap fee for the 400 square foot units that they're building next to Whole Foods. So that's why my question really is, if you're gonna build this so that somebody can pay $2,000 a month rent, is the problem that doesn't make sense, or that the people who have the opportunity to do this don't have the money to do it?
Two very different solutions.
And 30 tap fees for 400 square feet, right? That's a developer with a bigger plan and a longer term goal than any one of us doing it in our backyard, trying to help solve a situation, one 900 square.
I'm gonna be cynical and say that somebody doing this in their backyard is not doing it for the good, out of the goodness of their heart. It has to make economic sense.
Yeah. which is why
We
it's
as
important.
government do it out of the goodness of our heart. That's a business decision.
Is it tap an ADU more than adding a bedroom, and a bathroom to my house? Is that different or is it the same?
well, it's considered a dwelling unit, so probably
different.
the bedroom.
Would we be able to call it an additional bedroom bathroom in your house so that you're just paying for an increased tap fee instead of a whole?
You don't pay an increased tap fee based on additional bedroom in your home. You pay a tap fee based on single family residential use, for instance. It doesn't
Is it a
base
bedroom?
itself.
I thought it was, or.
It is for, well, Breckenridge is a
Yeah, I
bedroom,
think
like
we-
owned but not due kind of thing.
Tap fees aren't based on
I
bedroom.
don't think it's, no, it's.
Sanitation like is. Like your sanitation is, but
It's based on bedroom.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if so make it more affordable. If we call it.
Like, look at it, attached down low. Attached
It's
bedroom.
just one of these things of a language
Yeah,
trick we could play there.
yeah, I like that. It looks like we're only on slide.
Yeah. The end. We'll do one more slide.
So is the basic lesson from this conversation that everybody's interested in seeing if we can improve the ADU stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's make that work.
And in order to get more deed restricted housing.
Yeah, like I don't think my hypothetical lockup would work because you'd sell the house and somebody.
But it legitimized probably a substantial number of apartments and rental
That people
situations.
wouldn't actually do it
Legalized.
and would do it and be like, hey, I have a lockup, just no stove in it, and if I could. Put a little small stove in here, I would rent it.
And I think there's another spot where I would prefer us to try to get ahead of it, and SB 213.2 comes back and tells us how to do it next go round.
Ooh, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I think if we can get ahead of this, and then we can tell the state, we're good, we did it. move along.
Are
It's
they
coming
used
back.
by right in your code?
Yeah, you,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
in any zone?
I'd have to check.
No.
I can't.
They're
I don't think so.
not in,
the.
not in low density.
Not residential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is the lockout?
They're medium.
In all of is the lockout like?
I think the same, I don't think it's, I think low density residential is.
Not residential.
Doesn't it depend
So you can do a lockout in any zone district.
And it's dwelling unit, you need a hold that space.
Yeah.
So you need to have the one parking space. And that's actually a perfect segue for the slide.
You're welcome.
So we've heard a lot of conversations about parking and our standard code requires one parking space per bedroom, up to 4 spaces. So once you hit 5 bedrooms, you don't need to, provide that 5th parking space for your unit. And it does require 1 visitor space per 5 units. With the new affordable housing ordinance that was just adopted, they have slightly different parking requirements. It's 1 parking space per studios in 1 bedroom, 1.5 parking spaces per 2 bedroom, 2 parking spaces for 3 bedroom units and above, and then still requiring that 1 visitor parking space per 5 units.
And quite a bit less than that if you're within a quarter mile of transit,
Right.
which most of town is.
Right.
And so those numbers basically cut in half in the affordable housing ordinance if you're anywhere in town.
And if you're 100% affordable.
And you're.
Yeah.
And your number of, so they have to be 100% affordable rental units. But then, you get 0.5 spaces per studios.
Before we dive into parking, I just want to cap off
Dive into parking.
the lock off.
Yeah, so,
We can't talk about the ADUs without addressing the parking situation.
right, which is kind of why I wanted to go through everything, because it's not a linear conversation. They're all interconnected, so. Yes, everything's on the table.
This is just your.
And we're, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you're gonna get ahead of that SB 213, 14, what, 24, anyway.
Your version.
The ADU has to be a use by right and can't require parking for it.
Can't require.
Why can't you require parking?
That was proposed in this year's legislation.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
governor.
By their creation.
Yep.
They do.
What is that?
But they also didn't include any restrictions. Yeah.
True. True. Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, I guess that's all I have. We can start back at the beginning and talk about inclusionary zoning and go from there. Unless we want to.
Before this conversation goes too far, anybody gets too excited, anybody starts to think that inclusionary zoning is some sort of magic bullet. With due respect, Emily, it's a very limited number of Colorado municipalities. True inclusionary zoning, meaning mandatory as opposed to incentive-based programs. The state legislature recently adopted a statute that, assuming certain things happen in your zoning code, allows municipalities to engage in rent control. It was that rent control prohibition that 30 years ago prevented the town of Telluride from imposing its inclusionary zoning ordinance, right? Says you gotta make an affordable unit for so many units that you build, and you're gonna deed restrict it for affordability, both for sale and rent. And the Supreme Court shot it down and said, no, they don't have to do that. That's rent control. You can't engage in rent control. That rent control prohibition still sits in place in state statute, but the legislature recently created or attempted to create a workaround by saying that if you've done one of these several things in your zoning code, density bonus, for instance, a few things our code already does, but if you do these things, then you may go engage in rent control. Okay, so you have a statutory authorization. I'm going to take this to inclusionary zoning in a minute, but we're going to start with rent control. So you have a statutory authorization for rent control. Great. That begs the question of what you can really do for rent control. That begs the question of when your rent control moves from a regulation to a regulatory taking. That you can now be sued, right, for taking somebody's property interest. So what the state legislature has done is little more than solve the statutory prohibition that kept municipalities from engaging in rent control. It completely begs the question then of what level of rent control is permissible without raising a takings claim that is going to be viable, and that we're going to have to pay somebody for taking away the property right? That's a valuable property right, the right to determine the rent you're going to charge on a property. Don't kid yourself in thinking otherwise, right? We are taking people's property. Question is how much, to what extent, and what does it relate to? So now let's go to inclusionary zoning for a minute. Similarly, or not similarly, there is no statutory authorization or recognition from inclusionary zoning other than what I've just described. There is also not a single Colorado case that has examined a local inclusionary zoning scheme on a claim that it constituted a regulatory taking. Doesn't exist. It's gonna exist one of these days. One of us will be the lucky contestants, I guarantee it. Right? It's just a matter of time and where the soup gets brought first and how it gets framed up. Why is inclusionary zoning taking? Let's go back to, and when I say inclusionary zoning, I mean a requirement that says for every X units of housing that you build, you will build Y units and you will deed restrict them for affordability X, Y, and Z. So mandatory, you're going to build housing and you're going to deed restrict it so that it becomes less than its fair market value that you're going to be able to sell or rent it at. Why is that a taking? Well, Fifth Amendment, right? And nor shall property be taken without just compensation. There was a day, not all that long ago, really 30 or 40 years ago, where there was only one way the government could take property from somebody, right? And that was to physically appropriate it, to go lay a water line through it or run a road over it or whatever the case may be. When government is wise about it and does it in advance, it's called eminent domain. When the government just lays the property line over or lays the water line over somebody's private property, that's inverse condemnation. But at any rate, that was then. And about 30 years ago, a case went up to the Supreme Court, and the court determined that there was more than one way to take someone's property. You could actually take someone's property by imposing regulations that deprived owners of economically viable use of their property, right? So suddenly we had this idea of regulatory takings. We could take property and owe people compensation by doing no more than over-regulating it to greatly diminish the value. So what does that have to do? Covenants. That line of thinking has been extended into what is now known as the law of exactions. What's an exaction? Well, an exaction is something that a code makes a landowner give as a result of the regulatory process in exchange for something valuable, property right, the like. Makes the property owner give something valuable in exchange for a land use approval. Exactions are okay, right? They are permissible, but in order not to constitute a taking, they have to be within boundaries. And the first boundary that they have to be within is that there must be a rational nexus. A rational nexus between what it is you're demanding from the property owner, right? And what it is that they are proposing to do with their property that has created this need, your demand. And what I'm here to tell you is that a court's not going to buy the argument that the fact that you're developing this property means you got to give us affordable housing, because that's that much less property that has been built as a home and not restricted as affordable housing. Well, that's true of every home. It's true of every home that's been built in your community, right? So you need a rational nexus. You can find a rational nexus. You can't just make it up, right? You actually have to have evidence of the rational nexus. So what we need is a study that goes out and examines a couple of different questions, right? If you're just going to make exactions on residences and the construction of homes, then that study needs to examine the impact of the construction of a home on the need of the community for goods and services, which then drives the need for an employee, which then drives the need for employee housing. So there's got to be the rational nexus. There's a rational nexus here. It can be found. The kicker is this. what you exact must also be roughly proportional to the impact that they have caused. How much need for affordable housing have I driven if I build 2 units? I don't think I'm increasing, my point is very little, right? You make the rational nexus argument, right? More people are gonna go to Walmart now as a result of these homes. Walmart's gonna need to hire more employees, employees are gonna need somewhere to work, right? But it's incremental. Simply understand that the fact that we need affordable housing in East Borough building housing is not the rational nexus that we need. We need a nexus that says the impacts that this proposal is causing in terms of development creates the need for affordable housing, and it's got to be roughly proportional.
Can the rational nexus be displacing a local family?
Or wanting to.
Well, how are you doing? Well, but if you're building a piece of unbuilt dirt, how are you displacing a local family by creating a home where there wasn't one before?
Right, so an unbuilt piece of dirt does not have that same rational nexus, right? So what about if you're knocking down the old house or the cabin that was on there?
Was it a deed restricted unit?
No, but it was affordable because.
It was affordable only because the parties involved in that unit have decided to make it affordable, not because of any governmental action that made it affordable. So are they really proposing anything that changes anything? I mean, they've come to this agreement with themselves that make this affordable in your mind, that's fine. What are they proposing to do that impacts that, right? There's no guarantee, there's no guarantee with respect to that unit that will remain affordable tomorrow because the 2 people involved in the transaction can triple the rent.
That if Emily goes back to the slide. At the 2 examples. So Telluride has a formula.
Telluride's formula has not been challenged, is my point to you.
Could it be assumed that they built that formula based on a rational nexus? Would they have done that?
Oh, I'm not here to tell you there's not a rational nexus. There is a rational nexus. Right? I think the difficulty here is going to be in proportionality. But everyone simply needs to understand that that's the legal parameters we're working under, right? If we're going to engage in exactions, we've got to be able to justify it on there's a rational nexus. And then we have to be able to show that what it is we're demanding is roughly proportional to the impact that development is causing. Not development in general. So I'm not here to tell you can't get there. I'm here to tell you it's not a panacea. And I am dubious as to whether you could legally require somebody who's building 2, for instance, to build a 3rd.
Right.
Or 3 to build a 4.
I can't imagine that we can do that. Although we can potentially add accessory dwelling units with subsidies and whatnot as well.
And you can pick up all of those smaller units by creating an exaction and a fee in lieu as an alternative. So long as your fee in lieu meets the same requirements, right? And you'll have the rational nexus. And the fee in lieu allows you to be roughly proportional. It'll be fairly small for 1 or 2 units.
Right.
That's how you.
This question.
Sorry, I was gonna say, so a couple things in reaction to what you're saying, because number one, there's at least 10 cities or towns in Colorado, there's probably more rezoning ordinances that haven't been challenged. Number 2, they exist all across the country. And
they exist here and there across the country. They've been challenged in about 5 states. And the results of the courts are really based. Yeah.
It expressly says you can put in regulations and they are not rent control. So they're not called rent control anymore. You can offer some alternatives. You can create land use regulations and you have to offer some alternatives. And among these alternatives, number 1, you have to do one or more. Well, you can start with 1. And there's a list of things that you can do, some of which we know already. So I just don't, I guess I'm not that scared.
Okay, you should be, because the fact that the state legislature has said you can engage in regulations doesn't make it so from the standpoint of takings, right? A court will ultimately
But you
decide.
can help us write an ordinance.
I am gonna help. I'm telling you, we need a study that shows a rational nexus and establishes rough proportionality. That's how I can write an ordinance that is defensible. So I'm well aware.
Pursue a study.
What's that?
Well, are we, I think, where do we all stand, or how do we feel about this, especially on, because I think this is why this is coming up now, right? Council likes this direction, right? It's gonna fall a lot onto the commission to figure out what, how some of these developments are coming to us, how this map works out. And I know Andy and I are all in on inclusionary zoning. I haven't heard from the rest of council as adamantly, but.
Can I speak?
Yeah, yeah, Leah, go for it.
I was just gonna say, from a planning commissioner perspective, it is really disheartening to see fourplex after fourplex. They're tearing down a tiny little home where locals lived, or maybe they didn't, but they probably did. I mean, we just saw one where there was 10 little units that were torn down, where they're gonna build a ginormous fourplex, and I point blank asked the architect what it's gonna be used for, and it's short-term rental. So it's just really disheartening to see that over and over and over and over, and to say, like, why are we arguing about bulk plan envelopes when we really need housing and it's not happening? And it's not happening with incentives. I mean, we have a lot of incentives in our code, and I think they're awesome, but I think I guess it's my personal opinion, we are at the point where we need to require it. Because otherwise, this town is just going away one fourplex at a time. And it's fourplexes. Those are the ones that are tearing down a little. Four and above. When you see it at 4, you're like, couldn't one be, like you only require one of those to be whatever, be restricted in way. So I'm all about this. I really think we're there. I trust that is gonna help us not get sued.
He will.
See, the first thing is to find out from the very job. Right?
Well, here's the thing though, right? I understand there are other municipalities out there, a handful across the state. I also know good and well though, that not one of them has been challenged. I've read the cases in the other states. I know how the other Supreme Courts have dealt with this. Sometimes you get away with it. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time it's examined as a taking. And with due respect, if I want to know what the speed limit is out on the highway, I don't watch the cars ripping by at 85 miles an hour. I go look at the sign, right? So what other municipalities are doing is good for them. They're on the high road to a soup too, unless they get their ducks in a row in terms of being able to defend their exactions in the code. That's just the bottom line on it.
And so
I don't have policy. You can get there here, right? I don't have this policy dog in the fight. But I don't want you to set up a system where you start requiring things and we get challenged and we're in court 3 years from now and we haven't been able to do anything with our new system.
That sounds like, you know.
Just curious, we're talking a lot about the stick in the old carrot and stick argument. And you mentioned the carrot, our incentives a little bit. Would we get in similar trouble if we started providing better incentives for people?
You incentivize it all you want. You incentivize developers to walk to the table and do things voluntarily, not property tax.
What if we vote as a community to raise our own taxes with these
Can you give
exceptions?
tax breaks with a vote? Yes, you could.
We could do that.
Yeah, with an election, you can do whatever you want with your
We
tax
could come
code
back
and
and
incentives
say,
they create.
property taxes in the town of Frisco are about to go up 10% unless you can prove that you either live in your house full time or that it's occupied full time.
Did Tabor call that out? Did we know? Did we go into short-term rental?
He's saying with an election. He's saying, can you? He's saying differentials between residents and not? No.
So, okay, so maybe I said it, but is there an avenue somewhere there where we could basically vote on a tax increase for ourselves and at the exact same time give a tax break to people who are.
You could give a tax break to properties that were deed restricted for affordability. I don't think you can give a tax break based upon the residential status.
But so we're incentivizing deed restricted units then. Incentivizing.
I think you would have to do it by
instead of
giving by adopting a tax and giving the break.
Yeah, so to me, like, I'm not saying one of these is the right path or the other is the wrong, but maybe we need to be looking at the carrot and the stick at the same time. And not just because we're really focused on the stick. How do we make people do this? I want people to want to do this. Like, how do we make them want to do this? And right now, it's not working. Like, we see that. We're not getting what we need to.
In the projects that are being built, we have whatever the numbers were.
Yeah.
We have 123 dwelling units built and 36 of them are deed restricted. In addition to that, we have 100 and some odd units being built by NHP. We have, I mean, for
Some odd by Granite Park.
yeah, so I'm going to take it off the track for just a second, which is, because my perspective is, I don't see why it matters what we do if we figure out what we want to have happen. And right now, we're getting 1/3 of the constructed units in our town are deed restricted. That's considering we are at 5% deed restricted units right now. If we were to set a goal of X% of new, or how many units do you want? Do you want this town to be 5% deed restricted, 10%, 20? If we build Lake Hill at 900, if they build it at 900.
I also think those numbers are really silly though. Those numbers are really.
Well, every number is sitting type.
22, like, if you take that one project out, the percentage of deed restricted units that we're getting would look really minimal.
Of course, but if you take the one project of NHP out, it's going to look minimal. And if you take the other NHP project out, it's going to look minimal. And if you take Lake Hill out, it's going to look minimal. But there is a pipeline of these
And
projects.
We're currently playing catch up right now, right? We're trying to, and
When are we there?
a very wise man once said, government shouldn't be in the business of
Building
real
houses.
estate, right? And that's what a lot of this is.
The granite is, but the rest of
The
them.
NHP are. is
No,
too.
no,
Well, they are because we're giving them
we're subsidizing it so they build it, they own it.
subsidizing
If the
it.
project fails,
This
it's
would be
not.
getting us out of the picture completely. I feel like if we don't do this, then
I'm not saying
20
don't
years
do
from now,
or
we're gonna
do.
be in the same place and government's gonna have to be building stuff because it
I'm
hasn't
at
been
the
done.
loss of, is there a difference? Is there a difference between inclusionary zoning, incentive zoning, stick zoning? Does it matter?
And the carrot.
Does it matter if the end result is we get the units? And then the question becomes, how many units do we want?
Okay.
See, that I think is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because as many as we can. First off, you can never succeed. And second of all, you are destined to overcorrect, because anything we do is 5 years down the road. The crystal ball doesn't work. It really scares me to take that, just keep doing it. Because we have a lot in the pipeline right now. Don't know if we've got enough.
But this inclusionary zoning, you're looking at like those fourplexes and fourplex, you're like, how many are remaining? Is that just 15 units that you're getting out of this inclusionary zoning to say that underlying density there? So like, what's that number? Because you're like, okay, if we're only getting 30, what are you doing to the prices of everything else? If you say one on that 4 is gonna be deed restricted, the other 4 are 5 million. And that ripple effect goes out into the community. So you're taking all those stepping stone properties a little bit, potentially, and saying, hey, you want to move out of deed restricted and buy a market rate. Well, now every market rate is 4 million because we've done, I'm just potentially,
That's one of the points that people make against inclusionary zoning.
I don't want to get out there, I'm just saying.
All the research is mixed on all that. It hasn't been proven that it necessarily increases property values across the community, especially when it's a good housing market, like high-end, that produces high-end product like we do.
I'll make sure Lisa finished her point Thad's been trying to get in.
No, I did. I mean, I think that also makes sense to me. Because I know that's an issue right now, but I do think that if we don't do something, and I don't think that necessarily this is working, the programs we have in place right now are working fast enough or well enough to provide. I think we need to do more. But
No. I just wanted to try to answer Andy's question on incentives, right? Why aren't we talking about incentives? And just give a little bit of historical perspective, I'll step away. For many years, everyone knows, I think, our current density bonus provision says you get 1 additional market rate unit above permitted density for every deed restricted unit you bring in. And that incentivized the creation of lots of units hundreds of years. And it was only in fairly recent years that we had developers come before council and say, I can't pencil this out. My additional market rate unit just isn't going to cover the low side on the market rate unit. And I think we've had people tell us who would do it. Maybe 1.5 would do it. I don't know what the answer is, but that conversation just seemed to die right there. And maybe it's because nobody wants the thought of the additional market rate density. But that 1-to-1 provided us deed restricted units for free, essentially, for a lot of years. And it's only stopped recently when that came in and said, look, it just isn't an economic incentive anymore, it's a cost.
So
If you make me do 1-to-1.
in those meetings with the developers in the last 8 months, right? We've met with 3 of them.
Yep.
It was all, in my assessment, driven by construction costs, right? Our code is at 100% AMI. They were coming back to us and the consistent number was 160 AMI and it pencils out. They offered to build more and then we ran into the parking requirement, which is a whole nother assessment of the thing. I don't know where I'm at on inclusionary zoning. It sounds like it's a web and a road that I'm unclear on. I think there's ways to improve our incentivized side of the house. And also what I'm hearing with the inclusionary zoning is if we're looking at the fourplex that's all happening, you know, what Frisco is happening, are we going to get units? Are we going to get 1 out of those 4? What does that look like?
Money potentially.
Or potentially.
5A.
Or fees in lieu? Just curious. I don't.
Or is the project not going to happen?
Well,
You've now put a regulation on this project that makes it not pencil.
And it doesn't pencil.
It just doesn't.
Then it stays as a local rental.
Well, we can make it whatever we want, right? We can make it
We can.
in lieu, we can make it as easy as or as hard as we want it. We can, none of these programs are the same. We can draft our own.
Right, if I may. Everyone here is interested in this. Let's move forward on a nexus study and determine the legal way to make whatever works work, right? I mean, we're not gonna hash out right here what we're gonna figure out with inclusionary zoning, you know, what's gonna be legal or not. You're not gonna get an answer right now, Thad, from us that says, you know,
And likewise, right? I can't give you an answer on.
So the bottom line is, we're all arguing basically for the same thing. Tom talked with a group today that not only does housing assessment needs studies and all, but they can also do modeling throughout, which would answer a hell of a lot of Andy's questions along the way. How many dentists do we need if we have 900 units here? If we add 2,000 units, what are the services that are missing? You know, what's the infrastructure needs and all, right? So like, we all want this. This is the direction we all want. We just don't know how to get there. And right now, we are not going to hammer out those details of how to get there, but we can spend money and you know, get some new studies together that won't just go in a drawer, because that's happened many times in the past. They go in a drawer and then, you know, someone might dig them out 40 years later.
Where is this drawer?
Yeah, I know. So with that, you know, like, are we sending staff down that avenue? You know, that's I think the big question. And then the question beyond that is, are we relying from there on our appointed panel of experts to work out those details? You know, whatever they are, what should our 1-for-1 look like? What should our deed restrictions look like? What should our caps be at? What should, you know, all of these things, we shouldn't be hashing out.
If we look at policy, we absolutely should be.
Well,
We should have them enforce it.
Them hashing it out, giving us some suggestions of okay, sure.
But that's what we're doing,
So
right?
is
That's
it-
exactly why we're here.
Is the contention, all right, we meaning this body, wants to extract as much as possible from those who are choosing to build new housing units in our community. How much can we extract from them legally? And that's what a study would tell us?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay.
the long and short of it is yes. Because the study would.
But
The study would tell us what is the impact on housing demand, affordable housing demand of the construction of 1 unit, of 10 units.
What you're telling the builder is, okay, you have $1 million per unit budget. We're now going to make it $1 million potentially. And that extra 100,000 in cost to your project will be used this way. And that's why we can do that. To which the builder
Well,
can then.
you pull the number.
I'm just making up.
Of course, yes, if we can justify that number, yes, absolutely.
Then as long as we understand what we're going to hear from the other side.
And
You
then
wanna
all
shut
of
down
this
the
also
building,
doesn't be, it's not like 1 of your 4 units, huge townhome has to be this, what about density bonuses at all? You're gonna do 4 units, you're gonna do 4 units, and then you do a basement apartment. Or something, or an extra accessory dwelling unit for the affordable purpose. I mean, like.
As long as it's understood, you're raising the cost of construction in Frisco.
Sure, you will, because the need is apparent. And when we get a study that says if we're not done until we have 2,000 units, 500 units, I have no idea.
I don't think this community to bring the escalation of construction values. I wasn't here. Was the attitude when the construction business isn't very good? What can we do to help construction? Like, did that exist back then? Because
We know the nurses building. Right, I think that was purpose of trying to incentivize some construction activity during a downtime.
just market rate construction.
No, that was the bonus density for the project.
Yeah. Like in the 2000s, the bonus density thing.
Yep.
That's why we got those however many units, 25, I don't know how many, but anyway. That's why it penciled then. Penciled.
Well, the guy from NHP talked in front of our about, the LIHTC product, and he was like, the definition of, affordable workforce housing is subsidies, and that involves the government. It sounds like a little bit uninclusionary, where I think we'll get pushback is like, hey, you're putting these on individuals. Some of these homes that have been long-term rentals are people that have been in our community for 40 years and they're selling it. That's their retirement. They've been a part of their community. And now we're saying we're going to penalize you on your sale after you've been a part of our community because we need housing. To me, it's like, where can we be more creative in the incentives and those versus the penal takings and that? And it's like, I feel like going down the inclusionary is going to get us caught in a little bit like, yeah, sure, we should absolutely look for this nexus, but how can we be very creative other ways too, with ADUs, lockoffs, all these other things? I mean, can we continue to make this like work with some teeth in it? The biggest issue on planning commission is we have no teeth. We talk about standards and, making these diverse communities, and it's like, well, that's nice, but it has no teeth.
The person who owns the 1 unit that is on the market to be turned into 4, the value of their property just went down.
Yeah, and they are like, I know I'm in real estate and I put my real estate hat on for property rights, but I do believe in workforce and we need it very, very badly. But like the person that sold one that has 4 units, that was our fire chief, it's not like these aren't members of our community. And that was his retirement. And then he goes and says, I'm still gonna get this. And the developer's like, well, it doesn't chalk out, I ain't building it. What happens? They go down and then all of a sudden it's just 1 unit there. It's like, that seems very disproportional for the individual who's selling their property. And that's just one side of it. It's not saying that can't work, but how are we gonna make it work for the person who is selling it and get those building costs to work? And to me, that means governmental assistance and subsidizing.
Kelsey is the opposite side of that, okay, you're not making 5 million, you're making 4 million, but you're contributing.
Just ask yourself, would you be okay with that saying, yeah, I'm fine.
I'm fine with
Stashing
4 million.
that, being gone without that money? I mean, it's just.
So
I got my house because they wanted a family, a local family.
Sure, but then you're getting into fair housing laws and
That
everything,
day for
but
100 to 200,000 more that day to somebody else. This is the thing, like this, and this is how we make. And keep
It's exception.
You know.
All greed based, we're almost 100% built, so count things are going down to put up.
For sure, and with the, with government imposing on capitalism, which is what we're trying to do in order to make this an affordable place for somebody somewhere. And granted, we don't have the number, and until we know what the number is, maybe we're good with 150 units in the next 3 years. Maybe we're good, and maybe Lake Hill will come in.
With subsidies and incentives, we are sharing the burden among everybody. Inclusionary zoning, you're penalizing the person who.
Yeah,
Sure. So-
this 5A Texas, like absolutely good, like, that money should be higher. I mean, that tax should be higher
But then
and
you're,
like.
you're still talking about giving the advantage to the people with the money and using either tax dollars, like taking.
You're hoping that they're gonna be nice about it.
Well, the last project that I've talked to the folks at, and just so we frame up what affordable looks like today, I think everyone here knows this, but we should say it. Is the market rates in this project, we're going for 1.2, and the affordable units, we're going for 800,000. That's what we're talking for affordability. When I talk to people outside of the resort community and you say you're putting people in affordable housing to the tune of 800 to 1.6 million dollars, they laugh in your face. We all know that's the reality. I just wanted to put that elephant on the table. That's the battle. Like a fourplex that one gets sold for affordable, that's the numbers we're looking at.
Yeah. Depending on the size. The thing is because everything we've done is 1 for 1. It's got to be the same exact size that you're building here. Why?
And these weren't the same. These were
Right,
small.
yeah. Why not factor in a micro unit for affordability on top of, all of these things have answers.
I think for me, the one thing that we haven't covered, and I think unless Emily needs more on direction, I think this conversation needs to be had, I think, at 2 different levels, but I also am intrigued, and I think where we've already set the example for this, we just have to put it in any sort of things with What's Rest and mandating a part of that development agreement that they bring workforce units because of the impact. Like we've already done this once without actually having to have the code, but through a lot of other.
We own the property.
What's that?
Yeah, the property.
But we also like, a lot of other things that we use that to negotiate with, but I think we said 6.
Inclusionary zoning to me is like, if a Walmart comes in and you're providing 400 jobs, you need to provide a certain amount of housing.
I think we
Like that to me is what.
Yeah, something is right for.
We really do need to say, hey, family source, I mean, that ship sailed, but like, hey, big, somebody comes in or you're starting a big business, like, you've got to provide housing.
Yeah.
And like, is there creative zoning of like, hey, we put in 1 unit up at Public Works, could we put more units in Public Works, where there's. Like, I feel like we could take the creativity into other avenues versus just inclusionary zoning. Like, are there places that we could do better? Like, looking at, Safeway, can we put units on top of Safeway? Like, there are areas that.
Inclusionary zoning, it's all the possibilities that we're all interested in these possibilities. And we shouldn't be trying to shoot down what we don't have answers for at this point. Like we gotta start doing that.
Offering like what two sides of it. Like, I'm not like, oh, I would say zero inclusionary zoning. It's just like, here's some of the ramifications potentially.
So we'll continue this discussion on our end with council, talk budget cycle, we'll see what it takes to get Nexus studies done, borrow. Goodness is, it's gonna take a while, knowing those in budget cycle, because they're not, I can't imagine they're gonna be cheap, because it seems like shelf rate for a study is $100,000 right now, so. Yeah.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, we're all in the wrong business.
Goodness.
I spoke to, Tom spoke to today, and he said there are many doula grants out there for this exact thing.
Yep.
You can get this 100% covered if you just work on it and work towards it. You know, so I mean, this doesn't have to be, it's not gonna be like $100,000 out of our general fund. It doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to. I still have to cover all that after when we've.
Yes,
taxed them.
yes, we do.
We have the conversation. We kind of know what the study's gonna say. It's just what number is it? You know, we're sending them out there to give us a study to tell us how much can we extract from the builders. Okay, now we know the number. Are we willing to do this?
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's,
Let's do that first.
are we willing to do it?
Yeah. Are we willing to, yeah. I mean, let's have that, make sure of that before we go spend
And I
others.
think that,
Information.
yeah,
It's why.
Do that all
Why
the
would,
time.
yeah, it just doesn't make sense to have, make a decision without having the information.
Does the decision change if the?
I mean, I think that there's some people here that no matter what are gonna be opposed to inclusionary zoning, and I think there's other people here that are gonna be open to inclusionary zoning if it's a carefully, thoughtfully written ordinance, and it's one of many tools that Bristol can have in their toolbox, so I think that, yeah, kind of what Hunter said is, yeah, we have the input here from now, council needs to make that decision.
with the other two missing council members.
Yeah.
Chiming in.
And I agree. Yeah, it's a shock. I mean,
After that.
Do you,
but I don't like to spend 100.
2 years ago, the town was talking,
If we don't know what we're gonna do.
about jointly engaging in next study. And we backed away from it. Do you know?
But.
They have a study in hand. We're going down to short-term rental, but it's the same methodology. We could use.
Focus. ADUs, so I think maybe that'd be another good one to hit right now.
Get more. I think figure out what's stopping people and those things, especially with our, you get it free if it's either for local or 100% AMI rental properties, because you can't subdivide some rental properties. These are great properties. We need more.
Could we use 5A money for somebody building an ADU?
To
Do that, like, yeah, to pay
Yeah.
tap fee.
Pay tap fees with, if it's deed restricted.
If it's deed restricted.
Yeah.
It's just the program and budgeting it.
Where I think you could really give people to get over that hurdle, if you're like, if this is gonna be local, like, we're gonna pay your tap fees.
Well, and I know the county's they're doing a pre-approved ADU library where you just go in and be like, this is what I want. They say, here's your engineered stamp drawings. You don't need to do the site work.
Oh, I like that, that's great.
So I think-
Dre does.
Yeah. But I know but I think, I think those are, I think that's a step the county's also taken to address. Right, it's like, because not only do you have the tech fees, but then you've got blueprints and engineering, site planning, all of that. And I think goes back to the whole conversation. It's not just the tap fee, it's the financial burden for a lot of these. And I think any place that we could look at, I'd be all for it, and if that's.
And then do a huge campaign, so.
That's paying, the county's library will buy a library card for the town of
Let
Frisco.
Frisco pay your.
Wouldn't it be simpler to handle professional developers?
When
When a developer comes in and says, this project doesn't pencil, can you subsidize it by X dollars? They have to open the books to us. They have to show us why they're gonna do what we want them to do, and in return, we'll give them some money. That seems to be what you're saying about ADUs, right? If you want to build an ADU and you're gonna make money at it, show us why it doesn't make sense to you. Economic sense to build this ADU and open your books to us, build it, and we'll allow you a reasonable return.
I don't think it's the books, it's that, like my lot, my house is perfect spot for it. But I don't have the upfront cash to even start the process to then also get the second mortgage or whatever it takes to get the rest of the financing. To even get it started without, then the year plus to do it. And then get those rent, or the rent would be so expensive beyond the $2,000 a month. For a pencil. So I don't need to show you the books. I can tell you right now, it's just not gonna pencil without assistance. For the majority of us, and then we're not getting any more units. It's better for me to sell my lot and make it.
But I'm missing the point, I think. the whole point of an ADU is to become a landlord. Right? A landlord to the type of people we are trying to encourage in our community.
Agree with that.
That's a business.
I agree with that.
So if you need a little assistance to start your business, then that's what we're here for. But just to say we're going to waive tap fees and we're going to give money, I mean, there's an economic model that I think we should be. There's a level of responsibility that we need to marshal the money with. So if it's upfront money, great. It can be in the form of a loan, it can be in the form of a grant. I'm a little taken aback by what seems like an attitude of just throw money at our community residents so they can build something that they will then make money at without the conversation of checks and balances of the distribution of the funds. That's all.
We did have a question. If you want to jump in.
Thanks.
My question is just what the process is to get an ADU approved.
So they would have to apply for a site plan. It would likely be a minor site plan. Staff would evaluate how much, lot coverage they have, their setbacks, whether or not it's allowed, if they're in a PUD or.
Is that the same process as a building permit, or is it a more involved process than a building permit?
It's essentially the same process as building permit. You would require the same information. We would require the site plan and the building permit, but.
Well, I guess where I'm going with that is my question is, could you just do it with a building permit? Like you have to have this site plan. And you don't have to answer that question now, but just smoothing out the process.
Doesn't change the.
It's, if it doesn't change the footprint of the building.
Right, if that was like.
That's maybe answer your point just a little bit is that what we're seeing is people are not using the program. So I'm not saying like, let's start throwing money at it. Like, let's attack what is the problem? Why aren't people using it?
Yeah.
And let's attack that problem.
I agree 100%.
And if it's tap fees, if that's truly the reason, if it's construction costs, I don't want to throw more politics in people's way who, now open your books up. Well, now I'm definitely not doing it. We want this to get easy. And I'm not saying we want it to get free or that we want to all of a sudden start subsidizing Hunter's income and building an ADU. But like, let's figure out how to make it easy. Let's figure out how to make it affordable so that people can build.
And reasonable for all sides.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. That was what I was sensing was getting lost was reasonable for the town.
No, not just throwing money at it, but like trying to maybe figure out where the roadblocks are and make them.
That's great.
And another way to think about it.
We just did that on a big project by changing the code. There was a roadblock in the code. We changed the code. That's all I'm saying we need to be doing here is that.
Yeah, and just another way to think about it is how much does it cost the town to build a unit of workforce housing? Say I'm waiving $20,000 tap fee for an individual that's gonna build an ADU. All that cost me was $20,000, not the, however much it costs to build a unit of workforce housing.
Right, we're not spending.
You're not spending money to build it. You're getting that deed restriction for waiving a tap fee. You are absolutely ahead. I don't need to get anybody's books on that.
So I think
What's the difference between granite and NHP?
So I think the ADU is a pretty straightforward. I think a question that would be interesting is the lock off, because those get easy to do.
Yeah.
Hard to regulate on the
Yeah.
short-term rental side, hard to regulate on who's using them, how are they using them, with the intent of the getting someone who's living there full time part. And I'm all for them because I think there's an efficiency there. I think that's kind of almost the original inspiration of Airbnb is use what you have more efficiently and better. But like, I think an ADU when it's built is obvious how it's being used. The lock off is a tricky area where I think it's a great way to get more density, get more people here. But if, planning commission, every one of these fourplexes shows up and every one of them has a lock off because they're all 2,000 plus square feet now. How do we know that we didn't just make actually
A bigger problem
that we can't easily regulate? Or do we start a whole list of all approved projects with a lock off and?
Well, could you have a lockup that
Housing
has some
staff
tax
member.
credit or something, but they have to, get that tax credit code every year by submitting their lease and.
Yeah, I mean,
I know, it's so hard, it's just like. To get them, but I'm like, I feel like we're missing out on something that like, I see it all the time in properties, I'm like, they're like, we never go in the basement, and there is a lock off and a access door, and I'm like, we can make this work. This could be perfect, it's just very hard to regulate, but then they're not having a tap, they're not already, they have it there.
impact is.
It's just like, let's create an avenue versus the obstacle.
Anything else on these? We can go to parking, thoughts, concerns?
I just think that if you keep the lock over the code, you're not gonna get the ADUs that you wanna see.
So like, remove the lock off.
So.
Or no, not, well, then I guess you would just not have a lock.
So I think, yeah, you just have an ADU.
But it's just, it's still a lockup, but called an ADU?
In your basement, is that an ADU? If you have a separate entrance.
And a stove.
If it has a kitchen and it's in your basement, it's an ADU.
Okay.
So just
got
because basement doesn't define. Use that make it a. Exactly.
Even if people are gonna be incentivized to do a lot. If they think they're not
Okay, so we get rid of the lock.
Yeah.
No more lock.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I like that.
I didn't.
No.
We can work on having that conversation. We'll loop them later. Sorry, you agreed to get rid of block off, so we appreciate that. A few minutes left, we do have to take, tear down and switch over for the council meeting, but I think the parking is an important one for me, and I know it's on Emily's list. What else was there, Emily? I can't remember now. We didn't hit.
We kind of did hit it, but existing deed restrictions, I guess we didn't talk about what was working and what wasn't working, but.
I think we've got,
Difference between housing health and 100% AMI.
I think that's an easy one for council to hit. We have some other deed restriction conversations coming to work session probably, so that'll be an easy one to follow up with.
Okay.
But I think's more on our plate than, I think the parking's more impactful for this group, so that'd be great.
Yeah.
How does everybody feel about parking?
I just think parking is part of the whole greater plan. We need a transportation plan, and as we're getting more of these workforce housing, less parking and all, we need the ability, and that goes to the pedicabs and everything else. I was just.
Shameless plug there.
That's like the bottom tier of a transportation plan without, a few other steps above it. It just doesn't even work. And I'm not looking to be in that business at all. I just thought it was a good idea to, to bring to town. So parking goes along with that. We do need at some point, other parking options that don't force people to drive everywhere in the first place. That's the future, and that's all I really have to say about that.
I'm going to disagree. I think less parking is the future and micro transit and mass transit is the future. I just recently listened to a story about how there is more parking per person than housing per person in this country. And that is a huge problem to me. And I think we should be moving for environmental reasons, for humanity reasons. We should be worried more about housing people and finding other ways to move them around rather than making sure that everybody has a car. And because the people who have the cars are, the majority of them are people who have a lot of money, and we need to worry about people who don't. And we need to get people in houses. Or whatever we need to get them housed.
25 years ago, we turned down the monorail, which would have really made a big difference there. But, and this is the problem with that. Unfortunately, this is my own personal opinion. It's just like micro transit. We're too small micro transit has to be all of Summit County.
Yeah.
We're just part of it. You know, and so, and then there's the thing of everybody coming out of the airport or renting all these cars with crappy tires and driving up here, you know, and it's like, we're not gonna force, just like Peak One being built with smaller options and everything, we're not gonna force people to have less cars. You know, because we're just too small. I mean, we could set precedent and say we should do this because it's the right thing to
Well, I think we
do,
need
but,
to try to get the county on board
oh, for sure.
because. Yeah, I do think that's the way to go. If you keep giving people parking spaces, they're gonna keep parking cars on them. If people rent Airbnbs and there's no parking, then they're gonna take the shuttle up and they're gonna use the Summit stage to get around. Because they have no place to park the car. You can't bring a car if you have no place to park.
I think they'll just park it in the right of way.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Like they didn't know.
We see all the time is we, these car requirements.
Yeah.
And they don't use enough, they don't have enough driveway space. And then because they're making a bigger development.
Yeah,
And then they just drive through the long.
and then there's no.
Put boulders and things out there.
Like, it
to
feels like with
prevent-
parking, the first trigger has to be reliable transportation.
Yeah.
And then you can start
Which we
zoning out parking, but if you don't have reliable transportation, you're just creating a problem, in my opinion.
And some stage is not the, you know, the reliable.
Where rentals are perfect places where there's somebody to regulate and say, we don't have parking for you. Your rental comes with no parking, you can't have a car
Can't
here.
have a car.
But it has to be enforced if you're gonna eliminate parking. Or else it's just gonna impede on the neighbor or the.
So what we see a lot in planning commission, and kind of Patrick was talking about this, is we see these 4 or 5 bedroom units and they have to each have 4 or 5 parking spaces, and they show us an absolutely absurd. To get, it's like a 2 tandem, and then you have to back this one out, to get this one out. This person won't actually drive through this grass because we're gonna put this 3-foot wall that then you won't see in the winter, and then somebody will be like, why did the town make you put up this wall? This is so stupid. So I think where I'm going with this is the question is, do we need to have 1 parking space per bedroom for a 4-bedroom unit, you know?
Yeah.
Or do we need to, you know, up to 3 bedrooms or 2 spaces per single family? I think that's kind of just something that we see time and time again that is just hard to look at these site plans every single time.
I mean, that area where it would be more helpful, like, because that sounds like one of those code provisions we have that are the bane of you guys coming to a meeting and getting a good project approved. Is the parking even on a standard residential, non-deed restricted, single family home, like, is that where a lot of the.
But it's only gonna be market rate homes
Yeah.
with that 4-bedroom, you know,
Yeah.
like 4 parking, so it's like. Sure, I think we could eliminate it to 3, but it's gonna create probably a better project, but it's not gonna solve any of the housing.
At the
that we're
very
talking
least,
about
I think we could drop it to 3.
Yeah.
Could maybe even look at 2, but 4, I do, in my opinion, is like a little excessive. Maybe that's just me.
We need to look at the other end too, though, that, you know, the ADU, does the ADU need a spot? Does the studio apartment need a spot? Does the 1-bedroom need a whole spot or a half a spot? I think that's, because if we're talking about deed restricted units and trying to incentivize deed restricted units, you know, the housing, affordable housing ordinance over there bought us, by changing the parking on the 2 NHP projects, probably bought us 30 units.
What's a half a parking spot? Though? I don't.
Well,
Scooters.
It's one for every 2 units.
Like, why the half? Like.
Well, it's a way of calculating how many you need, and frankly, I think that in that kind of, those types of projects,
Yeah.
the rental projects, you have that opportunity. Do we have that?
I think rental you could do a lot.
Right.
And that's in the unassigned parking scenario.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where the.
Okay, so then that makes more sense. Not like a driveway, but just a sliver, a sidewalk. That's actually my parking spot.
Get a smaller.
You get a motorcycle. You know,
That would make sense.
But yeah, but when it comes to ADUs, where now, now a half a spot's not doing you any good.
Right.
Now you need a full spot for an ADU.
For an ADU.
For a studio, you probably need a full spot. For a 1-bedroom, you probably need a full spot. So a 2-bedroom deed restricted, do you need 2 spots? Or is that right where we start? kind of backing off the one per bedroom. As soon as you get to two, maybe with deed restricted, if it's 100%. You know, whatever the mechanism is, maybe that's where we can start giving parking breaks on deed restricted units. Once you go over that one bedroom, I think everybody's got to have one spot.
It should come with the conversation of it will be violated. What's going to happen?
Yeah, we have to have enforcement or else it's just.
If you have one spot in a one bedroom and all of a sudden another toothbrush shows up. Where's that? Where that? But this is a realistic part of the transition to fewer parking is the community may not be there as fast as your code.
What if you're renting to somebody who's got a, or renting to somebody who doesn't have a dog and your place doesn't allow dogs? They get a dog, do they have to leave? Or do you have? Yeah. So if you have a place that doesn't have a parking spot and you go buy a car, guess what? You don't get to live there anymore.
Yeah.
And I
What
think
if they,
that's.
is this only applied to rentals? Because if they own, then you have no recourse.
Well, I think the ownership is where it comes in if you have less in maybe how many spots something. You're saying that you get 2 spots for your 3 bedroom. Now that's, well, if you got 3 cars, then you just bought yourself out of this.
Well, I don't think, I'm happy. I just think it's a conversation that has to be part of this conversation.
Well, and I think we've also seen we're drastically underparked, and I don't know if Public Works is listening. I hope they're not, but. I mean, a part of the maturity of a normal mountain town is like, go to Telluride, like. Their system is phenomenal, and if you stay at a hotel, you park on town right away in neighborhoods, right? Like, we are so spoiled here that we have the largest right of ways. We are unregulating them.
Well, then
But yet we're regulating ourselves, and we're regulating ourselves to not build the affordable housing projects like the CDOT project. Because we're worried about parking on site when we have acres of land that we let everybody else park on all the time, except when we're plowing. So I think I would be kind of where Andy was going. I think we look at the parking, particularly in anything deed restricted. And as Jessica said, and maybe for everything, let's back it off a little bit. Let's mature our parking plan throughout the community to better reflect our desire to have housing than parking. And if it's something that continues to be ridiculous where they have to do tandem with a parallel spot in the back corner just to meet our parking requirements, like we're not helping them either as the government to do a good plan.
Yeah.
We're forcing them to make something that doesn't work. So
Is there anything with
I
parking?
fully agree with you.
Is there anything with parking that's preventing or disincentivizing ADUs?
Well, you have to park the
If you don't have the
ADU,
space, the
yeah,
parking.
so if you already have an existing
So is
home driveway and you can't expand your lot coverage to expand your parking space.
are we willing to compromise on lot coverage? for parking?
Yes, maybe you.
You know, it's
Yeah.
cuts too, because we've got a restriction on them, which causes people to draw these crazy diagrams.
It's the width of the driveway.
And you can park under the building or whatever, and, you know, and get around that, but you still need the access. You know, which is,
And parking works best when it's regulated, it's structured, and there's monetary penalties. I mean, like, if you start hitting people's wallet, like, everybody gets off Main Street now, and it's mostly locals that park to Main Street all day long. And, you know, but it's like, it would make me less mad. It's like, yeah, this is the local parking spot for this big deed restriction, like, these are extra bonus units, it's a permit parking, and if you park here, you're getting ticketed. Versus like, hey, nobody's doing anything, I park here all the time, you know, and so they do it, but if you are creative and make it and build it, they will come and regulate it. I think we could get around a lot of parking issues.
But I like the idea of parking on the right.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
So I think we need to wrap it up so we can have time to tear down and move, but I appreciate it. Commissioners, just thank you for everything you do. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we
And
had
can we
this
do
chance.
this
Maybe
more
we can do this more often. Yeah.
So this is.
Just let me tell you, easy is to find everybody's schedules that work. So shoot for as good of attendance, but yeah, I mean, if this is helpful, I think it's great for council to hear these things, to hear your struggles. And I think it's good that we expand the conversation so we can work on it for sure. Maybe try to make it more of a regular quarter or twice a year kind of conversation, but thank you so much. Yeah, somewhere. Next time, yeah.
You just.
With one of the changes, this could be.
Now that we're done, really good.
Good advertising.
And you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting. You don't have to leave. It's fun.
The break.
the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
Aronson,
See, here,
Burley is absent, Mortensen,
here,
Incan,
here.
Scripcheck Adrian,
Here.
Halenko,
Here.
and Held, I believe he's going to be remote. We're just waiting on him, but he's absent at the moment.
Thank you for roll call. First up this evening is public comment. Anyone wishing to do so may come to the podium or unmute yourself and raise your hand online. I will call on you. Please be topic specific for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. Keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. State your name and address for the record. And I'll go online, and I can never remember your first name. Sorry, but I know you're not Julie tonight.
I'm Fatty.
Fatty, that's right. I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay,
Fatty.
buddy. Good to see everybody. I live at 317 Galena, Unit D. Julie and I were listening to the previous meeting tonight, and I thought the conversation was a good conversation. I think you all were doing a really good job covering the housing topics from a lot of different angles. My only concern, and please, I am not denigrating anyone or their job performance or anything. I find my biggest concern is how you are going to not necessarily regulate these issues with the permits for building affordable housing and letting these giving funding to the builders. My concern is we live in the county where for years and years and years, things are unenforceable due to lack of manpower from the government's perspective. I've been staring, I'm not complaining about the house behind me right now, but I've been staring at this building project behind me for 3 years, and the number of infractions just build by the day. And I'm not saying I get the runaround, but I definitely get sent to various places and various people when we're trying to get something taken care of. And it just doesn't get done because it's my understanding that you guys don't have the manpower. I'm not saying people aren't doing their job. There's just no manpower for enforcement. And I think your ideas tonight were good. I just wonder how you're going to enforce things like, you have a 2-bedroom apartment. You might have 2 people on the lease. I mean, this goes on down the block from here right now, and there's 6 people living there. So you guys spoke about the enforcement issue. I think you really need to concentrate on an effort on how you're going to enforce it. I mean, I can't imagine Chief Wickman and his force are going to be responsible for this. I don't think that's something they're responsible for. And even if they were, I mean, how much manpower should they put on, issues of housing when there's other bigger issues going on in the county and such? I just am concerned about how you're going to enforce it. I have faith in you that you'll come up with reasonable, intelligent solutions. I'm curious how you're going to enforce it. And I think you really need to address that a little more, not more seriously, but a little deeper. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fatty. I appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback and always being online and listening to our meetings. I also noticed that and appreciate that. So thank you. Anyone else wishing to make public comment this evening? None in chambers, not seen any more online. Is that correct? And I will close public comment at this time. On to mayor and council comments.
I have one. I have noticed already this year that we have had numerous electric scooters zipping up and down the sidewalks in town. And I'm a little concerned once we start getting a little bit busier, what's going to happen with that. Some of the people doing that include people working in town. And so I'm concerned about that. We might need to have a little more enforcement on those vehicles not being on the road, excuse me, because they go really fast and they're going to take somebody out. That was all. They're super fun and they're a great way to get around, but I don't think they belong on the sidewalk.
That's something we probably have to look at figuring out how to word that so an electric wheelchair is not.
Right, of course, yeah,
Seems-
yeah. Electric
Bikes,
scooters, and-
scooters.
yeah.
Council, that's something we want to work into a work session discussion, talk to, see what staff can think about. enough support there.
It's probably worth talking about and then having a greater conversation of anything with wheels.
But we're going back there. Thanks, Rick. All right, all right.
Everything's about everything.
Yeah. All right, we will.
I wasn't gonna say it.
We will see. I don't know if we have work session time soon, but we'll see what we can. Yeah, figure out a way. We will try to find a way. Safety is important. Others?
You know, I will point out just from, we're heading into wildfire season. I was going to mention it to Andy. If you haven't watched on Netflix, Fire in Paradise, to better understand what could happen here or any small town in the woods. Watch it and be duly scared. This is a documentary.
Okay.
They basically compiled all of everybody's cell phone videos with interviews from when Paradise burned down. Including the school bus filled with children and the teacher trying to it was just. It's what we're fighting against, and it's a real opportunity to see what we should be scared of. Fire in Paradise.
I'd just like to point out one of my favorite community events happened last weekend with the town cleanup. It was so well attended. Staff is always makes it better every year. I think we took a couple of years off, but with the open house on all of our capital projects at First and Main, I know that had good participation. I think it's another way that we keep striving to better communicate with everybody, particularly the local set. And town looks great, participation was great, and just great feedback. And I always appreciate to see the community out there and taking pride in where we live and cleaning it all up. So thank you for all of that.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Did you, I was wondering what happened to those checks that somebody found?
I think they're probably thrown away, recycled, I meant.
See them, I don't know if that was something the museum would want, like they were, I mean, it was only 1976, but that was cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where they found that.
Yeah, there was some fascinating trash. Yeah, checkbook from 1976.
Yeah.
Somebody's house plans from long ago as well.
Yep.
In good shape still, so.
And an elephant.
And an elephant. Well, the elephant wasn't part of town cleanup day, but it showed up.
But it's
Excellent.
purpose to trash
Yep.
at some level.
If there's no other council updates, Tom, any staff updates that weren't in the memo?
My voice works. We're still taking planning commission applications through the 31st. Is there a 31st this month?
Through the end of the month.
End of the month. Very good. But Hunter and the mayor and Andy Held are already working on those and sorting through those. Really nice to see the high school graduate banners out. Unique thing that I saw the first time I came here, and it was nice to see them again. We're organizing a trip to the Park City area to review the High Valley Transit microtransit. Speaking of microtransit, we have a date of the July 17th. It's a Monday. We'll probably leave on Sunday night. So I would like to get at least one council member to come with. So if you're willing to volunteer, just let me know offline and we'll get you lined up. County commissioners are going, county manager.
Tom has connections in that neighborhood from what I hear, so could be useful. I think that's all I've got. Excellent. Thanks so much. Next up on this evening's agenda, and one that is always great to do and also is always sad to do, and that is a presentation and the recognition. And he's joining us online of Robert Anton Franken. Robert, good to see you online. I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person either.
Well, we know,
It's great to be in front of you again. Sadly, though, for the last time, probably.
Yeah. Well, as I said, never. It's a great thing to honor those like Robert who have taken such great care and investment in this community. And sad when we have to say thank you and safe travels and happy trails. But I just like to, on behalf of town council, would like to take a moment to recognize and appreciate Robert Franken's service to the Frisco Planning Commission. After 10 years of living in Frisco as a full-time resident, Robert and his wife Nancy have made the decision to relocate to Estes Park to be able to better support their family in Estes Park area and enjoy more abundant oxygen in a place where tulips bloom before June. Robert has served on many committees and boards in Summit County and in Frisco. He's on the steering committee for the community plan update in 2019, assisted in the 2021 town manager hiring process. He was a member of the Summit County 10-Mile Planning Commission from 2017 to 2022, member of the Summit County Countywide Planning Commission 2018 to 2022, and most recently a member of the Town of Frisco Planning Commission since 2018. During Robert's time on the Frisco Planning Commission, he's provided guidance regarding the development of Frisco while being a passionate advocate for universal accessibility, affordable housing, and transit. Robert's years of service, coupled with his professional expertise around leadership, his curiosity and thirst for understanding, and his genuine passion for making this community better, have greatly benefited Frisco. Thank you, Robert, for your contributions to Frisco. We wish you and Nancy all the best as you embark on your next adventure in Estes Park. And I want to personally thank you also for reaching out to me and helping, through your professional expertise, support me in all of my roles throughout council. For those who don't know, Robert does professional development and leadership training as one of his many jobs when he's not volunteering for the community. And he's always been available and willing to assist the town in any way we need at any time. And I think if you don't know Robert, you'd recognize him. He was a mainstay walking up and down Main Street and always smiling to everyone and saying hello. Robert, we have a beautiful locally made glass plaque with your name on it that you will always remember Frisco. I hope it gets in a sunny window in Estes Park and shines and puts beautiful light throughout your new home. We will miss you in here in Frisco, Robert, and thank you so much for all you've done.
It looks gorgeous. Thank you. And I will miss all of you. It's been a wonderful place to live, and we're sad to leave it. And yet we knew that it was the right time to make the change that we had to make.
Great. Well, safe travels, Robert. We'll see you when you pass through town.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert. It was an honor to work with you.
Thank you, Andy. It was great.
Next on this evening's agenda is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Skripczak. Adrian, is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Skripczak, Adrian,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Burley. Oh, absent. Held,
Yes.
Helenko,
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes. The consent agenda passes. Next up this evening on new business, this is agenda item number 1. This is first reading ordinance 23-11, an ordinance amending chapters 124 of Public Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco, Colorado concerning public health and safety by adding a new article 4 thereto to authorize the enforcement of certain town laws by community relations technician. I'll open up the public hearing. Turn it over to Thad.
Sure. We'll take this one.
Great, thank you.
It's a timely discussion based upon several comments made earlier in the meeting about the town's capacity for enforcement of its code provisions. The ordinance in front of you would authorize what many might refer to as a code enforcement officer. Our ordinance refers to it as a community relations technician. By way of background, we are living in difficult times right now for the recruitment of post-certified police officers, post being police officer standard training board certification. They're hard to come by. They're particularly hard to come by if you're hiring them into a position in which they won't be doing what they went to the academy dreaming of doing, right? Which is enforce criminal offenses and traffic and the like. And instead are doing what they probably rightly consider a little more mundane activities like weeds and barking dogs and and building code enforcement and for unauthorized construction and the various and sundry other things that you can do to violate our code that's about this thick. So this ordinance authorizes that position and is express about it not needing to be a Colorado Police Officers Standard Training Board certified individual. The individual is set up under this code to work under Community Development Department because frankly, those are the code that they work under on a regular basis. It makes a little more substantive sense, I think, to have this officer reside in that department. At any rate, that's the way it's been set up right now. This code enforcement officer, community relations technician, would be authorized to enforce any and all code provisions except provision of the traffic code, with the exception of parking. Don't enforce parking. They would also not be authorized to enforce any of our general offenses code, with the exception of garbage trash violations. There's one other, I think, nuisance. Noise, thank you. I think it started with an N. So with the exception of noise, this officer would not be, or this individual would not be authorized to enforce codes on general offenses. So criminal offenses, criminal offenses. Other than that, they are able to and authorized to issue summons and complaints into the municipal court. They would be expected to appear in that court and offer testimony and have gathered evidence like any other law enforcement officer. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I guess, how does this position get trained? Is there train? I don't know.
This is not a trained law enforcement officer. This is a code enforcement officer. I guess what I would tell you is there's no magic to enforcing a code on how tall the weeds are in your yard. I mean, there's no magic to barking dogs. I mean, these people generally need so if they aren't experienced, right, they need some guidance on how to put together documentary evidence and be ready to be called into court and, you know, be questioned and present that evidence and, you know, in the event we needed to have a trial or the like. But other than that, I don't think it's a very training intensive position. They're not going to have a weapon.
Okay, cool.
At least I don't think they're going to have a weapon. No, they're not going to have a weapon. It's up to their ultimate boss. I have to look over here, but they won't have a weapon.
I think what my way I saw your question was so I had the same one initially when we were talking about readings. I mean, it's just like the conversation we had tonight where, you know, like our planners know the code when somebody comes with documents and says, this is what we want to build. And they're like, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. This person is the person on the street saying, that's not allowed. That isn't the way we have set things out. And so I think it's more just probably sitting in a lot of those meetings, working with the planning department, community development department through all of those things, and then going through the stacks of books to make sure. And then I also assume that the chief and his team will always have them and support them if it gets scary, dicey, threatening, or whatever else. So.
Acted through the police department? Like if someone within the town wanted to report something, like the gentleman on the public comments before said, if they wanted to report that code is being broken, are they?
My guess is that call would go to the police department and then get routed upstairs.
Okay.
Based on its nature.
Questions? Put it up for public comment. Anyone wishing about public comment on this agenda item? So now, none in chambers, none online. I'll close public comment. Oh, back to council discussion. Great change. I know we've heard it. We've talked about it. Hopefully we can fill it, and this taking out some of the police provisions will help us continue to meet our great staffing, which we've heard is working. So.
Mayor, I move to approve on first reading ordinance 23-11.
Been moved to approve by
Mayor Pro Tem Incan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Malenko, I think I heard. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Scripcheck Adrian,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Burley is absent, Held,
Yes.
Palenko,
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Agenda item number 1 also passes on first reading this evening. Next is agenda item number 2. This is first reading ordinance 23-16, an ordinance repealing and reenacting chapter 167 of the Code of the Town of Frisco relating to the vehicles and traffic, adopting by reference the 2020 edition of the Model Traffic Code for Colorado, repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith and providing penalties for violation thereof. I will open up the public comment. Turn it over to Ed. It's your night.
Yeah, I guess so. I know this sounds hard to believe, but this is 190 pages of housekeeping. The model traffic code is about 190 pages long. It sets up all of the rules of the road that you would imagine and then some. It is prepared by the Colorado Department of Transportation. And CDOT proposes it for adoption by all Colorado municipalities. There have been several versions over the years. At the moment, the town is on the 2003 version. I don't want you to think our traffic code is that out of date, as there have been important substantive amendments over the years, such as the new offense of failing to slow down or move over for an emergency vehicle with lights on the side of the road, or making things not able to be cited as primary offenses, right? Such as defective vehicle, right? You're going to pull them over for something else, whether you can cite up for that. Those sort of one-off changes have been made over time, but we're now 2 versions out. And so 2020 is the most recent version, and it was most recently edited and revised by CDOT on July of 2021, if my memory serves me. So at any rate, it is here before you. The town, in adopting this code in the past, has made local amendments to facilitate our local municipal courts procedure. We also have at least one traffic infraction that is unique to Frisco. I think there are other municipalities that may have it, but it's unique to Frisco in terms of being added on to the model traffic code. And that is, you can be cited for careless driving based on having violated 2 other independent moving provisions in one driving episode. You don't have to meet the terms of careless. So our code differs in that respect, but substantively not in many others. So with that, again, I'll take any questions.
Does CDOT incentivize us to stay within the model code that they seem to put out?
Not really. No. It doesn't do us any good. It doesn't do us any harm, to be honest. Other than we're not in lockstep, right? Our code differs a little.
They don't withhold paving money.
No.
If we don't do this.
No, it's not like the feds and the highway and the speed limit on the interstate. No.
It's a good question. Yeah. Other questions? Open this agenda item up for public comment. Anyone wish to make public comment on this particular item may do so now. Seeing none online and none in chambers, I'll close public comment. Back to council discussion. It almost calls out your scooter problem in the careless driving section, but I don't know if that would say it meets electric assisted low power scooter.
Oh, yeah, no, there are provisions that concern, yes. It's not legal to drive them in the travel portion of the right of way.
There's the conflict.
It's not legal to drive them in the travel,
In nature, that's correct.
but we need to make it.
Depending on
easy, but
exactly
it's also
which ones
green.
we're talking about.
Yeah, so they need to be in a bike lane.
They're in the bike lane.
Yep. Otherwise, I'm good. Thanks, Dad, and everyone else who poured over all 100 and some pages. Adopt it.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve first reading ordinance 23-16.
Been moved to approve by Councilmember Scripsack Adrian. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Helenko. Is there a discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Incan,
Yes.
Mortensen?
Yes.
Scripcheck Adrian,
Yes.
Aaronson,
Yes.
Burley is absent. Held.
Yes.
Palenko.
Yes.
Agenda item number 2 also passes on first reading. Next up is old business. This is agenda item number 3. This is second reading of ordinance 23-14. An ordinance concerning the development of 2 affordable rental housing projects and in connection therewith authorizing 1, a long-term ground lease of certain real property owned by the town and known as 602 Galena Street, and 2, a loan by the town to the developer to aid in the acquisition of certain other real property known as 101 West Main Street, all in accordance with the development agreement between the town of Frisco and the NHP Foundation dated as of May 23rd, 2023. I'll open up the public hearing, turn it over to staff.
It's me again, I know, I think I got the next one too.
Yeah, you do.
At any rate, this
Blue
is
chair.
second, no. This is second reading, as you've noted, this ordinance was approved on first reading by all members present. There have been no changes to either the ordinance or the development agreement since first reading. I can briefly describe the deal again if you like, but I'm happy to take any questions. I know we've had several work sessions on this and description at the last meeting. That's just
Questions with that? Open up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this particular agenda item? And online and none in chambers, I'll close public comment. Back to council discussion.
To clarify, just so everyone knows in the audience and all, the money we're putting forth to this unit, we are buying workforce housing units for about $38,000 a piece. And this is a long time coming. Thank you.
Agreed, Andy. Thank you. Yeah, cool. Me too. I hope it all works out.
Sorry. I move to approve second reading of ordinance 23-14.
Been moved to approve on second reading by Councilmember Helenko. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Held. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Palenko.
Yes.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Scripcheck Adrian.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley is absent. Held.
Yes.
Agenda item also passes on second reading. It's quite exciting. I'm looking forward to that coming to fruition. Next, this evening's agenda, item number 4. This is the second reading of ordinance 23-17, an ordinance amending the chapter 53 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco, Colorado concerning alcoholic beverages by amending section 53-2 concerning the licensing authority and its assistant to provide for the delegation of authority to the town clerk for approval of certain liquor license matters. Open up the public hearing, turn over to Stacy. Sorry, Thad, you're off the hook.
Oh, man.
From you. Stacy Nell, Town Clerk, just before you again today. I feel like we kind of went over what was going on with this one gas station. It's basically folding them into match all of the other similar type of business licenses with regard to liquor, and so that they can add wine. And so do you guys have any questions for me? Anything else I can provide?
Staff. Okay, open this up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this agenda item? None online, none in chambers. Discussion and perhaps a motion.
My turn.
Sure, thanks. So, yep.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve on second reading ordinance 23-17.
Move to approve by Councilmember Aronson. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Scripsack Adrian. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Held.
Yes.
Palenko.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Scrapcheck Adrian.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley absent.
Agenda item number 4 also passes on second reading this evening. No. Does it with authority, though.
I know, I like that. Well done.
Next up,
Scared me a little bit.
Mayor, I move that we go into executive session pertinent to CRS section 24-6-402. determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation. Develop a strategy for negotiations and to instruct negotiators in conjunction with the potential construction of affordable housing project on the real property that may be purchased and real property that may be sold. Lake Hill.
Moved to enter into executive session by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Scripsack Adrian. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Burley is absent. Held.
Yes.
Blanco. Incan.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Scripcheck Adrian. Aronson.
Yes. Thank you. We will take a
Do-
minute. Andy, do you have a link for executive?
Yeah,
session?
do I need a separate link?
Yes, I will resend it to you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.